I'm your bedtime historian. Funny how a place that smells of fish guts and human fear could feel like the start of something grand, isn't it? London's Tudor docks, where you've just arrived, were less gateway to glory and more trapdoor to trouble. Step onto these creaking planks with me for a moment. The air is thick with tar-rotting eel skins and a sour tang that makes you swallow twice. Behind you, the river swells with ships carrying spices silk, and if gossip's to be trusted, rat-born curses bound for every cobblestone street. Somewhere in that mess, you're just another figure hunched against the wind. If this tale already tickles your sleepy curiosity, maybe slip your thumb toward like and subscribe. Call it a poor man's protection spell, less effective than a garlic sachet, but cheaper than paying off a dock guard. Ever wonder what other souls washed ashore here before you? Whisper your thoughts below if you've got a favorite ghost from history, someone you think might have braved these docks long before you did. Now pull your cloak tighter. Listen to the gulls cry overhead and come ashore with me. We're about to find out if you'd survive even one foggy Tudor morning. The gangplank shudders under your boots as you step off the ship and onto England's damp welcome mat. Behind you, the sailors unload barrels of dried cod and crates stuffed with who knows what. Some boxes rattle, some smell of cloves and nutmeg. Sweet luxuries that might never touch your lips. You're not here for cargo. You're here to see if your bones can dodge hunger disease and the watchful eyes of men who'd sell your secrets for a groat. New arrivals are easy prey. Dock hands lean on crates, spitting brown juice from chewed tobacco. They watch you like hungry cats. The city guards stand back more interested in bribes than your well-being. They say the plague sometimes sails in hidden beneath fish scales or slips ashore in a sailor's coughing fit. Some historians claim no port kept decent records of how many infected travelers slipped through. Others argue that's exactly how London's back alleys stayed full of nameless dead. A sharp voice cracks through the morning fog, an official demanding port fees you don't have. He's got yellowed teeth and a ledger fatter than a bishop's purse. If you've no coin, your choices dwindle. Find work fast, or find a corner to vanish in before dusk. They say one slip, one argument with the wrong guard could see you dragged to the stocks for a made-up crime. So you nod, you bow, you promise payment tomorrow. A rat scurries over your boot, bold as a tax collector. Somewhere up the quay, a fishmonger tosses fish heads to the tide. You wonder if you'll end up like that, picked clean and thrown to the river's hunger. But you keep moving. Past the barrels of tar, the rope slick with river slime. You pass a boy, no older than 12, hauling salted herring on his back, his ribs visible through a grimy shirt. Some say children worked the docks harder than grown men because they cost half as much and complained half as often. There's no record that counts how many children slipped off the docks and vanished into the gray, but scraps of parish notes hint at more than the city would admit. Your stomach knots at the idea of finding food, but first comes lodging, if you can call it that. The dockside inns reek of ale sweat and old straw mattresses crawling with bedbugs bigger than fleas. You peek inside a tavern doorway and see a man half asleep over a tankard shoes stolen right off his feet by some nimble-fingered thief. A serving girl eyes you newcomers mean coin or trouble or both. She turns away before you can ask the price of a night under her roof. A gull lands on a pile of fish guts, tears at the scraps. London is a city that feeds on itself fish, to merchant, to tavern, to gossip to gallows. And you. Right now, you're just hoping no one notices how thin your purse strings dangle. You press on shoes, squelching in puddles of river water and filth. A man coughs behind a stack of cargo. You wonder if it's just the cold or something worse. The rumor among sailors is that plague rats come ashore with every barrel. Some insist the air itself is bad. Herbal pouches hang from a few necks, desperate charms against foul humors. They don't help much, but they make the fearful feel braver. Historians still debate if the plague arrived by ship by rat or by pure bad luck, but they all agree the docks were the city's beating infected heart. You pause at the edge of an alleyway, the Thames muttering behind you like a restless old god. Ahead, London. Narrow streets, shuttered windows, secrets behind every crooked door, and you, a stranger, hoping to pass unseen, to find a meal, a bed, and the next dawn. Tonight, you've made it off the gangplank. Tomorrow, that's a gamble between your wits and the city's appetite. The wooden door creaks like a gossiping neighbor when you push it open. Welcome to the quest for somewhere, anywhere to lay your head tonight. London's streets are clogged with bodies by day, but by night, they're just as crowded, only quieter, darker, and full of secrets best left unsaid. Finding a bed here costs more than a whole day hauling fish guts at the docks, which means, for you and everyone like you, real sleep is a luxury sold by the inch. Some historians argue whether Tudor bed sheets were ever clean enough to be worth the coin. Others say cleanliness never mattered, warmth did. And so warmth is what you hunt for now. A tavern at the end of Fish Street promises a corner of straw and maybe a mug of weak ale if you're lucky. Inside, the air is sour with old sweat and cheap beer. A single candle, guttering near the hearth, throws shadows across the faces of the desperate dockhands beggars, a few sailors too broke for the inns by the river. The landlord's eyes flick over you, weighing your worth. No coin, no bed. But if you've a penny, well, then there's a rope with your name on it. You hear it before you see it, a thick hemp rope strung wall to wall across a cramped back room. Dozens lean on it, like tired laundry bodies, draped forward, snoring, coughing, dreaming of better nights. For 1 penny, you're allowed to rest your weight on the rope till sunrise. Then the landlord cuts it loose, and down you go onto the filthy floor, times up onto the next poor soul waiting for your spot. You could do worse. The street outside holds doorways and church steps where the unlucky curl up like stray dogs. Parish records hint at dozens freezing stiff in the London frost each winter. Some scribes wrote that God takes the poor, first a neat excuse for the living to step over the dead come dawn. You weigh your options by the hearth. A real bed-straw, tick-flea-ridden blanket might cost you a shilling or two more than you have. The rope, though humiliating, is at least warmish, surrounded by the fug of other bodies. You think of the docks, the boy hauling herring, the guards eyeing your pockets, the rumors of plague riding the fog. Here, at least you'll last the night if you guard your purse and keep your boots on. A brawl erupts near the bar. 2 men arguing over who stole whose last crumb of cheese. A chair tips over. The landlord bellows a dog under the table, snarls at the noise. This is no place for heroes or gentlefolk. You're just another shadow, hoping no one notices you've nothing left to steal. Through a cracked window, the city hums outside distant bells, a drunk singing about Queen Bess, the hush of the Thames licking its banks. Sleep won't come easy here, but it might come all the same. And in Tudor London, that's enough. Some scholars wonder how many city folk lived half-awake dreams weighed down by hunger and cold. Few diaries survive from the working poor. but scraps of court testimony tell tales of drunks nodding off on church steps and waking up robbed blind or never waking at all. A woman with a basket of stale bread stumbles in her eyes, scanning the room for buyers. She trades crusts for pennies, slipping coin into her bodice before the landlord spots her cutting into his ale sales. You catch her eye. She offers you a hunk so hard it might break a tooth, but it's better than an empty stomach come morning. The rope looks better and better. You hand over your single penny fingers, reluctant to let go of your only armor against the night. The landlord points you toward the back. A space opens between a snoring sailor and a ragged apprentice boy who can't be more than 13. You hook your arms over the rope, lean forward, and let the ache in your legs drain away. This is what passing for sleep costs you tonight: 1 penny a stiff back, and the risk that someone might lift your purse while you dream. But you'd rather hang here like old laundry than shiver in the gutter with the frost biting your feet off. A gentle mercy London style. Somewhere in the room, a man coughs so hard he bends double. You hear mutter's plague, or just the ale. No one knows. No one wants to find out. Eyes close tighter, heads drop lower on the rope. The candle sputters its last gasp of flame. Shadows settle in, tucking the restless bodies into a blanket only the desperate know. Your eyes grow heavy. Outside, London sleeps too uneasy, hungry dreaming of tomorrow's coin. But for now, you sway with the rope's gentle promise. Morning will come, if you're lucky. Morning seeps into the tavern like cold soup, thin, lukewarm, and not nearly enough to revive you. The rope gave out hours ago, dropped you and a dozen other half-dreamers onto the splintered floorboards. You stretch stiff shoulders and peel straw from your hair, then listen to your belly's first demand of the day breakfast, if you can call it that in Tudor London. Outside, the streets churn awake with hooves and boots, merchants and beggars weaving through damp alleys. You follow your nose toward something warm, any hint of bread porridge or the promise of ale week, though it may be. Some historians say ale was safer than the water, teeming as the Thames was, with refuse and secrets nobody wanted to fish out. It's debated whether this was truly necessity or just the best excuse to start the day tipsy. You drift into a yard behind the tavern, where a cook ladles thin gruel into chipped bowls. Steam curls in the dawn air, but the smell is more boiled sock than feast. For the nobles in their walled gardens, breakfast might mean sweetmeats, imported fruit, or swan pie spiced with cinnamon from half a world away. But for you, and for the bulk of London's poor, a stale crust dipped in ale is the meal you'll dream of calling hearty. A queue forms behind you, dock hands with blistered palms, a maid with her apron stained from yesterday's labor, a toothless peddler clutching a sack of wilting onions he hopes to sell by nightfall. You clutch your bowl closer, hoping nobody eyes your meager portion too hungrily. A boy beside you snaps up a drop scrap of barley bread before it hits the mud. You lock eyes for a heartbeat somewhere in that look is the truth of Tudor London. Hunger doesn't wait for manners. It's said that a misplaced insult over breakfast could ruin reputations or worse. The wrong joke about the Queen, an idle rumor whispered at a neighbor's table. There are records of men hauled before church courts for careless words, forced to kneel in penance for insulting bread that wasn't theirs to mock. Nearby, a cook slaps a hand away from the pot, too many fingers snatching second helpings they can't pay for. The pot hisses over coals' thin steam, carrying the scent of barley and bean staples of the city's poor. There's a half-whispered rumor that the cook waters the pot with river water when no one's looking. Some scholars argue about it still. Did the poor drink more from the Thames than they should have? Or did rumor alone poison London's faith in its own breakfast? You sip the warm ale. It's watery sour, but safer than the well. It slides down your throat, chases sleep from your bones, and leaves you half full better than nothing. Your mind drifts to the feasts you'll never taste, pies stuffed with pigeon or venison trenchers soaked in gravy, peacock with gilded feathers, a spectacle made to flaunt wealth more than fill stomachs. Those stories drift through the taverns, carried on breath, heavy with envy. A soft laugh catches your ear, two men deep in ale, swapping tales about a lord's breakfast gone wrong. The rumor goes that one slip of etiquette at the wrong noble's table could unmake a man. No elbows on the table, no speaking before spoken to, no reaching across a dish that wasn't offered. Surviving a meal with the highborn required a nimble tongue and an even nimbler sense of when to keep it still. You tear another bite of bread. It grits between your teeth, a reminder that no matter who you are, your breakfast marks your place. Out here, among the alley kitchens and cheap ale, you're just another mouth to feed one that might go hungry tomorrow if you're unlucky or careless. Some parish clerks scribbled notes about families breaking bread crusts into broth, stretching one meal over 3 days. Surviving wasn't about feasting. It was about pretending hunger wasn't gnawing at your ribs. A dog noses your foot-tail, wagging more from hope than trust. You flick at a crumb, there's camaraderie in shared scraps. It vanishes under a cart crumb in mouth eyes, bright with the victory of the moment. You envy it in a way. A dog's worry is today's meal, not tomorrow's master or next week's rent. Behind you, the line grows longer. The pot grows lighter. The cook's eyes dart toward the street. Too many hungry bellies. Too few coins clinking in grimy palms. London wakes hungry, feeds itself just enough to keep moving. Then dreams of better bread that never comes. Your bowl is empty. You scrape the last smear with your finger, savor the warmth fading from your stomach. The air bites at your skin. The day calls full of filth to hall floors to scrub, or trinkets to peddle if you want to afford tonight's rope to lean on. Breakfast in Tudor England, barley beans, weak ale, and a question that lingers on your tongue. How many mornings like this can you survive? The air tastes of soot and sweat long before the sun climbs high enough to chase off the river fog. Your stomach still complaining about that thin breakfast reminds you there's no time to linger. If you're to make it through another dusk in Tudor London, you'll need work, any work, no matter how grimy or mean it leaves your hands. So you slip back into the streets, boots squelching through last night's rain, and whatever else the city dribbles from its gutters. Some say London's filth was both its curse and its lifeline. Laborers always needed, so long as someone was willing to carry waste hall water or scrub the stones clean enough for noble boots to click along without complaint. Historians still argue whether Tudor laborers were truly free or just bound by invisible chains of hunger and debt. One thing is certain, you're about to find out. A boy near Cornhill calls out for hands. There's a brewer's cart stuck in the muck again. You and 3 other half-starved souls put shoulders to the barrel-laden wagon, straining until your back pops like old timber. The brewer tosses you half a penny, barely enough for the next stale loaf. You pocket it anyway. Pride has no stomach here. By midday, you're in a narrow yard behind a merchant's house. A matron stands at the door, pointing her broom like a commander's baton. Scrub the floorboards, beat the rugs, haul water from the street pump. Her voice slices through the air sharper than any blade. You nod, tongue tucked behind your teeth, better to hold it than risk her docking your pitiful wage for backtalk. Some records survive that speak of servants fined a week's pay for breaking a dish or daring to mutter at the wrong moment. On your knees, you scour rush mats that reek of spilled ale and dog fur. Each stroke leaves your knuckles raw, your thoughts drifting to the other poor devils of London who shuffle through the same grind. Servants' apprentices, street hawkers, they form the city's backbone, half invisible, wholly exhausted. A slip of the hand, a word too sharp, and you might find yourself tossed back onto the street with nothing but your bruises for company. Out in the alley, you catch sight of a ragged vendor, calling his wares pins, ribbons, a scrap of lace. He's a hawker, half beggar, half salesman, hoping to charm a penny from housewives and maids. If you're clever, that could be you next week. Trinkets weighing down your pockets instead of your shoulders weighed down by buckets. There's a freedom in it, so they say. Some scholars still debate whether hawkers truly had it easier than servants, or if they just starved more creatively. The matron's shadow falls over you. She inspects your work sniffs, then mutters about how the last boy scrubbed better. You bow your head, swallow the sting. She tosses you a crust of bread payment, apparently for your back and knees. Your coin, that'll come at the week's end if she remembers, and if you're not replaced by some cousin's nephew with a stronger back. Evening seeps in slow as treacle. The city hums with the clatter of carts, the cries of fishwives packing up for the day, the distant peal of a church bell calling the devout, or at least those hoping to keep the parish watchful eyes off their sins. You lean against a low wall, licking the last crumbs from your palm. A pair of boys dart past, bare feet slapping the stones, a stolen apple between them. The vendor they robbed shouts half-hearted curses, but doesn't give chase. He knows as well as you do that London's cobbles protect the quick and swallow the slow. A woman beside you, older back, bent from too many days, like yours, chuckles when she sees your empty hands. She mutters that the city feeds you just enough to keep you crawling back for more. Maybe she's right. Maybe tomorrow you'll try hawking. Or maybe you'll find a master who wants an apprentice, someone to teach you a trade, wrap you in rules, keep you under thumb for 7 years in exchange for the hope of your own shop one day. That's if you're lucky. Some apprentices never get their freedom. Some masters work them to the bone, then toss them out when trade sours. London's streets darken as the sun dips behind soot-stained rooftops. Lanterns flicker to life, feeble stars, trying to keep the night at bay. You tuck your tiny earnings into a hidden seam of your coat, counting them once, twice, as if wishing might multiply the pennies by morning. You glance down at your raw hands, the grime under your nails, a badge that no noble eyes will ever see or care about. Some days, the city chews you up for its own profit. Other days, it lets you gnaw, back just enough to wake hungry again. Tomorrow, the river will still stink. The streets will still spit out more work than you can stomach. And you, if you're clever, will still be here to drag your feet toward the next day's scraps. London's streets are cruel enough by day. By dusk, they become a tangle of shadows that breathe and scurry when you're not looking. You tug your collar higher, mindful of the wind that carries rumors just as easily as it carries sickness. They say a single cough could end your story quicker than any pickpocket's blade. And here among the maze of alleys and slop-filled gutters, you learn the city's most whispered truth. If the filth doesn't kill you, the plague or pox just might. You step over a channel of runoff that oozes through the cobblestones, thick with kitchen scraps and worse. Some swear these open drains are the real veins of London carrying secrets and disease from door to door. You pass a street barber hawking his services beside a grimy sign, promising fresh bloodletting tooth pulling and pestilence cures. His knives gleam under the flickering lantern wiped on his apron, as if that's enough to banish sickness. Some historians argue whether these barbers did more harm than good. Others believe they were the only doctors the poor could afford. You pull away before he can wave you closer. Instead, you press into the flow of bodies inching through Pudding Lane. The name promises sweetness. What you get is a stew of rotting meat smells and the occasional waft of scorched bread. It's here you hear your first real plague whisper tonight. Two fishwives trade gossip over a basket of limp eels. They mutter about a family down by the wharf, 3 dead in as many days, boils and black spots hidden under hastily wrapped sheets. The city guard pretends not to hear, but everyone does. Rumor is more contagious than any sickness. You duck into a narrow passage between leaning buildings, half hoping the walls themselves might shield you. The wood creaks as if it remembers every cough that ever echoed here. In a dark corner, you see a girl, no older than 15, pressing sprigs of lavender into small cloth sachets. She offers one to you, for a farthing claims it'll ward off the bad air. You finger the brittle petals, the faint scent, a comfort more than a cure. Some scholars still argue whether people truly believe these sachets worked, or if clutching herbs was just a desperate ritual, like crossing yourself when the wind shifts wrong. You buy one anyway. Around your neck, it goes your tiny shield against invisible enemies. Maybe it'll help. Maybe it won't. But hope is cheap insurance when real medicine's out of reach. Farther down the alley, you stumble across a gathering by candlelight, an old woman selling a salve she claims draws the sickness out through the soles of your feet. A cluster of ragged souls press coins into her palm, kneeling to smear foul-smelling grease onto their skin. You wonder how many of them will wake tomorrow, feeling cured only to find the lumps and sweats waiting beneath their blankets. Somewhere overhead, a shutter slams shut. You catch sight of a pale face peering through warped glass before vanishing into the gloom. Behind every door could be a house quarantined by rumor alone, a single sneeze enough to see the parish mark your door with a crude red cross. Few want to be locked inside with the sick. Fewer want to bury what's left when the parish bell tolls. You pass a line of carts, piled with straw mattresses, some bound for noble houses, others for plague pits, when the dead outnumber the words to name them. The air thickens with the smell of vinegar, another desperate ward against contagion. A drunk leans out a tavern door, hiccuping about foreigners, bringing pox on every merchant ship. His words slur into curses about Spanish traders, Dutch sailors, any unlucky soul with an accent thicker than the Thames fog. Blame is easy. Answers cost more than most can afford. A rat darts across your boot. You flinch. You think of the stories, how these small shadows slipped ashore in crates of grain and silk, bringing fleas that gnaw on more than crumbs. Historians bicker over whether rats alone birthed the plague or whether London's filth was plenty enough to do the job unaided. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. When the cough comes, it doesn't care who carried it here first. You stop at a market stall shuddering for the night. A woman wipes her hands on her apron eyes, darting from your threadbare coat to the sachet around your neck. She mutters a blessing under her breath, as if the herbs might protect her too if she doesn't stare too long. You nod, moving on. Suspicion can be more contagious than any pox. The lanterns flicker, as you emerge back onto the main street. You clutch the lavender bag at your throat and wonder if this night were your last, would you know? Would the air taste different? Or would you drift off the same way you arrived, another ghost trailing your own breath through streets that will forget you by dawn? The city hums with secrets it's too tired to keep. And you, wrapped in your tiny charms and larger fears, walk on, hoping tomorrow you'll still be here to walk these alleys again. You slip through the crooked lanes until the scent of steamy air curls around your nose, thick with soap sweat, and the laughter of people pretending they're cleaner than the streets outside. Welcome to London's public bathhouse. If your nose wrinkles, you hide it. For many, this damp haven is the closest they'll get to feeling fresh, even if the gossip that floats with the steam sticks to skin longer than any grime ever could. You step through the low door, ducking your head so you don't knock your brow on the warped lintel. Inside, the world softens voices, muffled by dripping walls, and the hiss of heated water poured into wooden tubs. A boy no older than 14 sweeps wet rushes across the slick floor. He doesn't look up. Some say these bathhouse boys overheard more secrets than priests ever did, trading whispered tales for a half-penny tip or a leftover scrap of bread. A row of half-empty tubs lines one wall, some with steam curling from them like breath on a winter morning, others with water gone, lukewarm, slicked with soap bubbles and questionable flecks. You find a spot by the far end, furthest from the loudest gossipers. A bent old woman ladles water from a copper pot into your tub, her hands pink and cracked from decades of scalds. Historians still argue whether Tudor bathhouses spread more disease than they cured. Some say the warmth washed away filth and fear alike. Others point to the lice that survived every scrub and the fevers that never seemed to stay away for long. You strip down, easing into the shallow water that nips at your knees before embracing you whole. It's not exactly clean, someone before you left their soap film behind, but it's warm. And that's half the battle in a city that bites your bones through your clothes. You lean back against the tub's edge, letting your shoulders sink beneath the scented steam. Somewhere nearby, a man boasts about his cousin's trade in silk stockings, the kind only lords can wear. He says, as if it were his own gold stitched into every thread. Across the room, two women giggle behind a draped cloth. You catch snippets, someone's maid caught with a butcher's boy, rumors of a constable's mistress paid off in stolen spices. Bathhouses were confession boxes without the priest. Tongues wagged freely when skin was bare, and the city's dirt circled the drain instead of crusting under fingernails. Your eyes flutter closed for just a breath. The warmth seeps into your ribs. But you don't let your mind drift too far. Too many stories begin with a bath and end with more than soap left behind. A careless scrape of skin, a razor nick from a bathhouse barber, a lover's cough, 2 benches down. Sometimes a single drop of bad water found its way inside you and never left. Some scholars say the plague skipped the bathhouse altogether, too steamy for fleas. Others swear fleas thrived here, fat and happy, as customers slipped home, freshly scrubbed and newly doomed. A young girl shuffles by, dropping a fresh handful of rosemary into your tub. She claims it keeps evil humors away. The scent clings to the steam, sharp and green. You thank her with a nod you can barely muster. How many coins have you spent tonight? A few farthings for warm water, a penny for rosemary, a copper to tip the boy, sweeping the rushes so he won't pocket your boots while your eyes drift shut. A man at the far end clears his throat loud enough to hush the laughter. He launches into a tale about a merchant who slipped in for a soak one winter night and left lighter by 2 rings and his purse. Some swear the thief still bathes here, hidden in plain sight, among the steam and soap. Others argue the story's older than the bathhouse walls themselves, reborn, whenever someone leaves poorer than they arrived. You run a cloth over your arms, scrubbing away the dock's salt stink, the tavern's stale ale, the alley's sickly rumor. For a moment, you almost feel new. Almost. A cough near your shoulder reminds you that no bath washes London clean for long. The walls sweat with more than steam whispers, bargains, mistakes made in heat and hidden in fog. You stand water sluicing from your skin. The cold air nips where warmth used to cling. You dress quickly, fingers clumsy with damp cloth. Outside, the wind will find you slip through your damp hair, tease your half-clean skin with a chill that says, you can't scrub London off so easily. Before you step back into the night, you drop a final farthing into the old woman's cracked palm. Her eyes flick up no blessing, no thanks, just a nod. That means you've paid for your place in this fleeting warmth. You push through the door, steam curling after you like a ghost of comfort left behind in the tub. The street greets you again, colder now, sharper. You smell of rosemary and faint soap. Maybe for tonight, that's enough armor against the city's next embrace. Back out in the night air, your skin prickles, where the bath's warmth fades too quickly into London's chill. The street lamps flicker fat tallow candles struggling behind soot-smudged glass. In the pools of weak yellow light, you catch glimpses of silk wool, rough linen, all weaving past one another like threads in a frayed tapestry. Here in Tudor England, what you wear says more about you than your name ever will. You slip down a narrow lane, lined with stalls selling scraps of fabric second-hand cloaks, and the occasional bright ribbon, lifted perhaps from some noble's laundry line. You run your fingers over a bolt of deep green cloth, soft, finer than anything a dockhand or washer would dare claim. The seller squints at you. He knows your purse isn't fat enough for velvet, but he lets you look an unspoken kindness, or just a bored man's mercy. Sumptuary laws hover over you like an invisible snare. Only nobles can wear silk or velvet trimmed in sable. The statutes dictate who may wear what colors stain your sleeves, what fur warms your collar, what embroidery circles your cuffs. Some scholars debate whether these laws truly controlled the masses or merely gave the crown another excuse to fine those foolish enough to break rank. Either way, a silk doublet on your back tonight would cost you more than coin. It might cost you freedom, or worse. Near the corner of Paternoster Row, you spy a man adjusting his feathered cap, too fine for his boots, which are cracked and caked in river mud. He catches your stare, lifts his chin, and strides on as if the queen herself had kissed his hem. They say the quickest way to look important is to look expensive. But in London, the quickest way to be punished is to look richer than your rank allows. Rumors swirl of tailors hauled before the courts for stitching silk sleeves onto commoners' coats. Fines ruin them. Shame sticks longer than any stain. You duck into a clothier's stall, where rough wool lies folded next to plainer linen safe choices for someone like you. You weigh the cost of a new jerkin sturdy, scratchy, the kind that won't draw eyes, or the church's suspicion. A voice near your elbow, 2 apprentices whisper about a constable's son caught parading in silver-laced breeches he'd no right to wear. His father paid twice once to free the boy again to hush the whispers. Surviving London's social maze means knowing when your threadbare sleeves are your best disguise. Your eyes drift to a length of ribbon dyed bright saffron, the kind that says you've coin to waste on vanity. You imagine tying it at your wrist, a tiny rebellion. But your stomach reminds you there's dinner yet to be earned, and ribbons don't fill empty bellies. So you leave it draped over the stall's edge, walking on, before temptation knots around your wrist tighter than rope. You pass a pair of city watchmen near the pillory, laughing about last week's fines. One fingers a scrap of fine lace evidence lifted from a seamstress who dared stitch it for a baker's wife. They joke that the baker's bread was less expensive than his wife's sleeves. You wonder who paid more. In the end, the seamstress, fined into ruin, the wife paraded for shame, or the baker left with stale crusts and fresh gossip. Beyond the market, a rag seller drapes frayed cloaks over a wooden frame, hawking them to anyone desperate to hide tears or stains that mark you as poor as you truly are. You watch a mother slip her child into a patched wool coat sleeves too long, hem trailing muck. Some records claim sumptuary inspectors turned a blind eye to the truly ragged what's the point of finding a soul who can't even feed their children. Other accounts insist the crown's collectors never missed a chance to squeeze coin from even the barest purse. Your fingers tug at your own sleeve. It's rough, worn thin at the elbows. Nothing here to tempt the inspector's quill or a noble's disdain. A safe invisibility. And yet some part of you wonders if blending in too well means you'll vanish entirely. In Tudor London, survival is equal parts humility and defiance. Stay plain enough not to be noticed, yet shrewd enough to watch for moments when a flash of color might open doors you'd otherwise never touch. A gust of night wind lifts your hair, snags the reek of tallow smoke and stale fish from the market behind you. Ahead, the alleys narrow again, pulling you deeper into the city's hush. Silk sleeves, woolen caps, velvet linings. They're all costumes on this crooked stage. Tonight you walk it draped in plain cloth and borrowed caution. One day, maybe you'll wear silk honest, or stolen, or forged. Or maybe you'll stay in rough homespun forever, outlasting those who wagered everything on flaunting borrowed finery. Historians still argue how many broke the laws without ever being caught, how many fines lined the crown's coffers rather than the people's pockets. Your footsteps tap out a quiet promise. Tonight your clothes won't betray you. London has 1,000 other ways to test you first. If London has a pulse, it beats loudest in the open-air tangle of its street markets, an endless maze of stalls, criers, and watchful eyes waiting for a moment's slip. You push through the crush near Cheapside, where the smell of fresh fish wrestles with bruised apples and yesterday's turnips. Here the city's hunger shows its teeth, and sometimes they're sharper than you'd like. The cobbles glisten under leftover rain and the juices of fishmongers' barrels. A woman in a linen cap bargains over a string of salted herring, while a butcher flies off a lump of dubious pork. You hover by a basket of bruised pears' fingers itching to test the skin. But you know better, reach too eagerly, and the stallholder's shout might mask a nimble hand slipping into your pocket. Pickpockets love the market. Some say they drift through the stalls like ghosts, but ghosts don't eat, they do. And you new to this swirl of elbows and sharp looks are exactly the fat purse they dream about. Of course your purse is anything but fat, thin as your cloak, rattling with just enough coins to make you care if they vanish. A shout snaps your attention sideways. 2 men are arguing beside a fish stall, one swearing the other lifted a trout from his pile. The monger joins in, waving a gutting knife like a conductor's baton. While eyes turn, a boy of 12, maybe younger, slips past a fruit vendor's cart, one hand deep in a customer's pouch. Smooth as river fog, he's gone before the man notices he's lighter by a week's bread. Historians still debate whether Tudor markets bred more thieves than any other part of London, or simply gave them better camouflage. A crowded stall is the perfect stage for a nimble-fingered act. Some constables swore the worst cut purses worked in pairs, one to bump your shoulder, the other to brush your purse. By the time you patted your hip in panic, they'd be 2 alleys away, arguing over who got the bigger share. You wander on, pretending you're invisible. You listen more than you look. A soft clash of coins. A child's squeal when an eel slithers from its basket. A beggar woman mumbling prayers, while her eyes scan the crowd for a dropped loaf or a loose purse string. She locks eyes with you, then looks away. There's no charity here, only transactions. The market gives and takes with the same hand. At a stall near Bow Lane, you see a fishmonger's helper. Big arms, bigger grin, shouting about fresh cod, while two young lads hover too close to the piles of gleaming scales. You watch their dance. One asks, the price pokes. The fish's eyes laughs at the smell. The other edges behind a distracted buyer, fingers dipping with practiced care. A flick of the wrist, gone. A moment later, the helper notices his missing coppers. But by then, the boys are ghosts again, swallowed by the sea of hats and baskets. Somewhere overhead, church bells toll the hour. Merchants yell louder to drown the sound, hawking stale cheese and wormy apples like they're rare treasures from the East. The air prickles with the tang of wet wool, pickled onions, and human sweat. A boy shoves past you, no apology, just a grin that shows he still has all his teeth, unlike the fishwives yelling insults at him. You pause by a barrel of oysters you can't afford. A man beside you fumbles with his purse strings too long, too obvious. You clock the shadows moving near him, two shapes that slip and swirl behind hanging nets of onions. He catches you watching, follows your eyes, then clamps his hand over his coins, a breath too late. The pickpocket's gone, but the lesson lingers. Never flaunt what you can't defend. A soft drizzle starts to fall, slicking the cobbles and raising the smell of old scales and onion skins. The market doesn't close for rain. If anything, the weather makes people careless. Hoods pulled low, hands hidden in folds of damp cloth, senses dulled by the cold trickle down their spines. A bread seller shouts for buyers, 3 loaves for a penny, if you don't mind their yesterday's bake. You count your coins. Enough for a heel of bread, maybe an onion if you push your luck. You hand over your copper, feel the warmth of the loaf through the cloth. Small comfort. You check your purse twice before tying it deep inside your jerkin fingers, brushing the knot like a ward against the market's clever wolves. As you step away, you glimpse the fishmonger's helper, again squinting down the lane where the boys vanished. He knows they'll be back tomorrow. The stalls always fill up again, the same trick, played on different marks. Some scholars say London street thieves kept the city honest in their own crooked way, reminding the rich that fortune could slip as quick as a purse string. You pull your cloak tighter, loaf under your arm, eyes flicking to every shadow that moves too close. In Tudor London, a market feeds you if you're clever and starves you if you're careless. Today you keep your bread. Tomorrow. Well, tomorrow you'll walk these stalls again and hope your fingers stay one step ahead of someone else's. The bread from the market is little more than a memory by the time dusk folds its gray shawl over the city. You wipe the crumbs from your sleeve, mind, still turning over the knots of pickpockets and sharp eyes. But in Tudor London, a full belly is no armor at all, when your tongue might betray you quicker than any thief. One slip of a word, one ill-timed joke, and your fate could land in the hands of the church courts faster than you can swallow your last crust. You drift down a narrower lane, now drawn by the low hum of voices leaking from a crooked tavern door. The sign above swings in the breeze, a crude painted boar, its tusks chipped like half the patron's teeth inside. Within candlelight, flickers over tankards' elbows, and secrets too careless to keep quiet. You step through the threshold shoulders, brushing the doorframe worn smooth by years of drinkers too drunk to mind splinters. Inside warmth hits you, stale ale bodies pressed too close, and the sharp tang of spilled beer soaking into rough floorboards. You find a corner near the hearth, where the shadows blur your presence safe enough to eavesdrop, warm enough to keep the night's damp from settling in your bones. A pair of men trade slurred jokes at a battered table nearby. One a stable hand, the other, by the look of his ink-stained cuffs, a petty clerk. Their laughter peels off the beams overhead, drawing side glances from a woman serving watered-down ale to a group of apprentices at the next bench. The clerk puffs up, launches into a tale about a priest's secret mistress, punctuated with a joke about the queen's pious appetite. The stable hand barks out a laugh so loud it jolts a rat from under the bench. It's harmless enough. Or so it seems. But behind them, half in shadow, a man with a thin face and patient eyes picks at a crust of cheese. He watches the clerk, listens closer than any friend might. Some say the church courts keep such ears in every tavern, informants paid, in coin, or forgiveness, whichever buys silence cheaper. Surviving records show ordinary folk dragged before the parish, for offhand insults, fined for muttered blasphemies, forced to kneel at dawn prayers for words they barely remember saying. You cradle your empty mug, let your eyes wander the room. A boy no older than 15 nurses, a bruise under his eye, listening too intently to a pair of loud merchants swapping gossip about a local baker's wife caught stealing eggs from her own henhouse. The tale winds and bends until it lands somehow on whether the queen herself eats eggs on Fridays, half scandal, half boast. All it takes is one of these half-drunk tongues to wag too freely, and tomorrow's dawn might find someone in the stocks, neighbors spitting at them as they shiver in shame. Some scholars argue whether the church courts truly policed morality or simply kept a tight leash on restless mouths. Others say gossip was London's real law, everyone tattling on everyone to keep the city small enough to control. You wonder who might be listening to you right now. A snort, a snicker, the wrong tilt of your lips at another man's joke. Sometimes that's all it takes. A woman in a rough brown kirtle sits nearby, smoothing crumbs from her apron as she leans close to an old cooper, murmuring something about a new preacher who promises to pardon sins for coin. Her words slip like honey sweet at first, until you remember they stick like flies to bread. You sip the last drops from your mug, wishing you had a few pence for another round, something to keep your tongue too wet to wag. The stable hand's laugh crackles again. He says something crude about the bishop's girth, how the man's belly blocks half the pulpit. The clerk wheezes, pounding the table. You don't miss how the thin-faced listener tucks this morsel away behind a tight-lipped smile. He slides from his bench before the next round coat, hem brushing yours as he passes. Maybe he's off for another pint. Or maybe tomorrow morning he'll be at the church's back door, trading your neighbor's careless joke for a blessing and a warm loaf. A hush rides the air for a moment, broken only by the hiss of a fresh log settling into the hearth. In that silence, you feel the weight of your own mouth, your tongue, your teeth, your fragile slip of breath that could cost you your name, your coin, your place in a city that devours secrets and punishes truth told too freely. You stand, pull your collar high, and slide out before the clerk's next story buries you in its echo. Outside, the street air bites cold at your cheeks, but at least it doesn't ask you what you've heard or who you might tell. London's alleys coil tighter around your steps. In Tudor England, blasphemy costs more than bread, and no market stall sells forgiveness cheap. The tavern's warmth fades behind you, replaced by the sharp kiss of night air laced with chimney smoke and the faint sour tang of yesterday's refuse still clinging to the gutters. London, after dark, is a different creature, entirely quieter in its corners, yet louder, where shame stands in full view, nailed down in wood for all to see. You hug the shadows along the lane, drawn by the dull roar of a crowd and the flicker of torchlight that makes the night seem alive with jeers and rotten vegetables. Ahead, the stocks and pillory stand like crooked sentinels at the crossroads. By day, they bake in the sun. By night, they become theater-free entertainment for anyone with an old cabbage and a bit of venom to spare. You edge closer, careful to keep your head down, blending with the fringe of onlookers. A man stands bound in the pillory wrists and neck locked in place by rough-hewn timber. His shirt is torn, where turnips and spoiled eggs have found their mark. A child giggles as her mother hands her another clod of dirt to lob at the captive's face. Some say these public punishments were the only true justice the common folk could afford humiliation in place of heavy fines or prison time. Historians argue over whether the pillory served order or simply fed the city's hunger for spectacle. Tonight, you see the answer, written in the crooked grins and greasy fingers clutching handfuls of wilted greens. Here, crime is a carnival punishment, more about the crowd's delight than any lesson the poor soul in the stocks might learn. You slip through the throng, catching snatches of rumor about the man's crime. Some swear he swindled a fishwife at market. Others claim he mocked a constable's limp. Or maybe he owed a butcher's boy for a pig he never paid for. Truth hardly matters once the timber closes and the jeers begin. A stone whistles past your shoulder, too close. You flinch, drawing your cloak tighter, reminding yourself that all it takes is one unpaid debt, one foolish jest, and you might find your own chin resting on splintered oak. Near the stocks, a second figure hunches with head-bowed legs through holes that clamp her ankles tight. She's older hair, a wild tangle of gray, and grease dress crusted with the damp of spilled ale and whatever else the crowd has chosen to throw. A boy tugs at your sleeve, whispers she's here for cursing her landlord in church. You glance at her lips, swollen cracked. Perhaps they muttered truth sharper than the church liked. Some records hint that stocks and pillories made as much money for the city as they cost. Each fine paid up front, each jeer a tax on shame. A shout breaks through the air. A young man steps forward, flings a soft tomato that splats across the pilloried man's ear. Laughter rolls through the crowd like thunder. You half smile despite yourself. There's a twisted camaraderie in watching another soul's disgrace. It makes your own hidden debts and muttered curses feel safer smaller. Yet even here, there's a game to play. Some of the clever ones in the pillory twist their shame into coin. A ragged man at the far end of the row wears a painted sign around his neck. Drunkard and liar, it says. But at his feet sits a battered hat, half filled with pennies, tossed by passers-by, who admire the flourish of his drunken bow each time someone lands a hit. Some scholars claim these petty criminals turned punishment into performance-surviving shame by selling their humiliation as street theater. No record tells if they felt less cold when the stocks finally opened and the coins jingled back home in their pockets. A constable drifts along the row lantern bobbing. He barks at a boy, aiming stones too large to be fair sport. The boy ducks behind his mother's skirts, grinning with the smug thrill of near mischief. London's punishment is never just about the guilty, it teaches the watchers too. Stay small, stay quiet, pay your debts, and keep your tongue tied when the ale flows too freely. You lean closer for a final look. The man in the pillory lifts his head just enough to meet your gaze. Eyes, bloodshot mouth, twisted in a grin that dares you to laugh or pity him. He spits missing your boot by a whisper. Maybe he deserves the stocks. Maybe he doesn't. The pillory doesn't care. It only cares that you watch, that you join the city's chorus of stifled disgust and hidden glee. A sudden gust of wind rattles the torch flames, sending shadows flickering across the gathered faces. You shiver, reminded how thin the line is between the watchers and the watched. You step back, turn away before your coins, and your tongue betray you. As the jeers fade behind you, you slip into the night feet, quickening over wet cobbles. Another lesson tucked under your cloak, one more rule in a city that demands you bow your head, mind your debts, and keep your jokes private. Unless you fancy becoming tomorrow's cheap entertainment, the echoes of mocking laughter cling to you long after the pillory fades behind. London's streets at night feel wider now, emptier somehow, as if the city sighs between its bouts of spectacle and punishment. But the quiet is thin, full of rustles behind shuttered doors and footfalls you can't see until they're too close. This is when London's other watchers emerge, those who trade the day's petty crimes for the shadow's larger secrets. You follow a curve of lanterns strung along an alley, too narrow for a cart, your boots scraping the cobbles slick with drizzle. Up ahead, two men lean together, beneath an iron sconce, its feeble flame casting their broad shadows against a brick wall. Their cloaks are rough, their shoes cracked badges of the city's working poor. But pinned to each man's breast is a small tin badge, the crooked star of the Night Watch. Some say the night watchmen are the city's final line between order and chaos. Others claim they're the biggest crooks of all, drunk, more often than sober, bribed, more often than thanked. Historians still argue whether the watch did more harm than good, or simply kept London's alleyways from swallowing fools whole. Tonight, you'll decide for yourself which version you believe. The taller of the two sees you lifts his chin in a half nod. Out late, are you? His voice scrapes the edge of friendly and dangerous, like a blade dulled by too many scabbards. You shrug, pretend your hands aren't balled into your sleeves. He gestures with his lantern, a yellow eye that swings over your face, your threadbare coat, your empty palms. No trouble here. Not tonight. They drift ahead, boots clopping through puddles, halberds tapping against door frames. They knock twice on a tavern shutter, exchanging a word with a boy who slips them a flask. Paid off in gin or coin, it hardly matters. Their shadows dance ahead of you, pausing when an alley mouth coughs out a shape too quick to place. A cat, maybe, or something with sharper teeth. You fall in behind them, close enough to share the faint bubble of safety their badges pretend to offer. A woman leans out an upper window, emptying a chamber pot with a careless splash that narrowly misses your shoulder. The taller watchman swears, shakes his fist at her cackle. Even they can't control the city's filth when gravity helps it along. At the next corner, a hunched figure melts from a doorway. A young man with a limp, his eyes flicking to the watchman's badges before he offers up a greasy grin. He slips a halfpenny into the shorter one's hand. It vanishes into the watchman's coat, and so does the man, free to drift down the lane with no questions asked. Some rumors claim the watch made more money turning blind eyes than catching thieves. Surviving court records hint at bribes noted in margins, whole trials undone, when coins change pockets in the dark. You know better than to linger too long. The taller watchman turns, gives you a squint that says you've shared enough of their lantern's glow. Best move on. Let them patrol the next street without your eyes marking which back doors they tap on for hush money or hot ale. You slip down a narrower lane, away from their boots and clinking halberds. The night grows thicker, here shadows stretching between buildings like webs. Your footfalls soften over straw scattered to soak up rain. Somewhere, a dog barks, once silenced by a curse or a thrown boot. You keep to the wall, one eye on the flicker of torchlight far behind you. Near Cripplegate, you find another pair of watchmen, hunched under a dripping awning, sharing a pipe that sputters in the drizzle. They barely glance at you, too busy laughing about a merchant's boy caught sneaking out a back window with 2 wheels of stolen cheese strapped to his belly. Couldn't run for all the dairy, one wheezes, smacking his thigh. You wonder if the boy paid them off, or spent the night trussed up next to the stocks you passed earlier. Either way, the watch will wake tomorrow with heavier purses than their wages can explain. A sharp crack snaps your head up, just a door slammed too hard in the wind. But your heart hammers in your throat all the same. The city, at night, is never empty, never truly asleep. Some secrets crawl through these streets as freely as rats in the bakery cellars. The watch may catch a thief now and then, but they can't catch the cold hunger of those who stalk the darkness for a coin or a careless step. As you near the edge of the ward, you see the watchman pause beneath a crooked sign, a faded crest marking the parish boundary. They lean their halberds against the wall, slump onto a barrel. Their heads nod forward. Sleep steals them as easily as any thief. In the end, London keeps its own peace. Or doesn't. You pull your collar tighter, eyes flicking back once at the snoring watch. Good luck to them. Good luck to you too. The alleys won't forgive either of you if you wander too soft tonight. You slip away from the sleeping watchman boots, brushing puddles that glimmer like black glass in the guttered lamplight. The air tastes of rain and something sharper, like ink. And old sweat signs, you're nearing the borough's legal heart, where Tudor London's courts do their brisk, brutal business. They say justice here moves faster than a pickpocket's hand, cheaper too, if you have coin or a cousin in the right pew. A stone archway leads you into the yard behind a timbered hall, its windows flickering with candlelight that leaks secrets down onto the cobbles. You press closer, drawn by the hum of voices, men arguing over insults, debts, accusations, half whispered and half shouted. Inside these walls, the truth is less about what's right than who can spin it quicker. Some scholars claim the average trial took less time than your last mug of ale and insult, a push of bloodied nose, then verdict and punishment, all before the next candle guttered out. You slip along the hall's edge, until you find a crack in the shutters just wide enough to see the room within. A cluster of townsfolk shuffles on worn benches, heads bent together in tired worry. At the front, a magistrate squints at a parchment, while a bailiff leans on his staff as if it might keep him from nodding off altogether. Beside them, a barrel-chested man stands, accused arms crossed over a tunic still stained with last night's drink. He glowers at a neighbor, thin, sharp-nosed, pointing a bony finger and spitting out accusations like stale breadcrumbs. A tavern brawl you gather from the snippets that drift out. A spilled pint turned to an insult to a broken tooth to a complaint in the city's ear. No barristers here for the poor, just words and witnesses, friends or foes. It hardly matters which, when reputation can be bought for the price of tomorrow's breakfast. Historians still puzzle over how many innocent souls paid the price for another man's clever tongue. Inside, the accused swears by his mother's grave he never touched the man. The magistrate waves him silent, his quill scratching a note might decide whether the man's purse grows lighter or his neck wears the stocks for a week. A clerk reads out the charges in a voice like cold porridge, flat, flavorless, yet final. No drama, no grand speeches. Here the spectacle is in its speed. A soft cough to your right makes you flinch. You edge back into the shadows as a woman slips closer, her eyes darting from the shutter to your face. She holds a bundle under her arm, bread maybe, or a child's blanket. She nods once at the window, then back at you. Her brother's trial, you guess, or her husband's. She wants the verdict fast. Mercy is in the swiftness, not the outcome. Drag it out, and the parish fines stack higher than the crime ever cost. Inside, a verdict drops like a hammer. The magistrate's voice flattens the room to silence. A fine. Small mercy, no stocks, no whipping post. Just a handful of coins the accused likely doesn't have, but must find or face worse. The thin neighbor smirks as the barrel-chested man spits on the floorboards, his only rebellion left. The bailiff steps forward, not to comfort, but to collect. You drift back from the shutter, the woman lingering behind to catch the final words. The yard's damp stones gleam under the moon so bright they almost wash out the shadows that hide your thin purse, your cracked boots, your borrowed coat. If you ever land on the wrong side of a barkeep's temper or a neighbor's loose tongue, you'd better hope your coins can talk smoother than you can. Some say in Tudor London, a man's best defense was not truth, but who'd stand beside him swearing it. As you move off, you hear another case start inside a boy, caught with stolen apples, 3 days of stocks if his master doesn't cover the fine. You wonder if it's the same pair of nimble hands you watched slip a purse by the fish stall. Maybe the boy will learn to run faster, or lie better, or pay the watchman quicker than the victim does. There's no real lesson here, only the city's reminder that everyone's luck is rented, never owned. A church bell tolls, once marking the hour's slow creep into deeper night. You pull your cloak tighter. The courthouse lanterns dim behind you as you follow the crooked lane back to London's darker veins, where gossip and rumors trade places with silver coins and spit-shined promises. Justice here is swift, but survival still demands you run quicker than a verdict, or pray the next case doesn't whisper your name. You slip back into the narrower lanes behind the courthouse boots, knocking a quiet rhythm against stones slick with mist and midnight sweat. London sleeps poorly at the best of times, and worst of all, when the harvest goes bad. Tonight you smell the city's hunger, even before you hear it. The bitter sting of stale grain ground too thin, the faint sour whiff of baker's yeast gone wrong. the sharp salt of worry that seeps from every shuttered window. A flicker of torchlight up ahead draws you toward a street you know by rumor alone. Baker's Row, they call it, though. There's more grumbling here than bread. A line of people snakes down the lane, huddled shapes pressing against one another for warmth as they clutch baskets and sacks in empty hope. You drift closer, pretending you belong, though the stale heel of bread in your coat pocket tells you you're luckier than most tonight. Near the front, a baker's boy, no older than 16 apron, dusted in flour, and despair, waves his hands to settle the growing hiss of angry voices. The ovens are cold, he pleads. No more flour to grind, no sacks arriving from the countryside. The harvest failed. In 2 counties, rats got the rest, and the granaries stand locked behind stout parish doors. Some claim the grain's there hidden for higher prices come spring. Others swear smugglers slip it away by night, bound for richer mouths than yours. Historians argue whether Tudor bakers were villains or scapegoats, men caught between hungry crowds, and lords demanding their cut before crumbs fed the poor. Parish scrolls scribble tales of riots sparked by loaves priced beyond a laborer's weekly wage. Rumors spin faster than millstones a cart tipped in the street, flour barrels smashed and fought over like spilled wine at a noble's feast. You step back as a woman near the front lifts her voice thin and sharp as the edge of a bread knife. She wants answers, her eyes hollow but fierce. How much is left? Where's the next sack? Who's hoarding what? Her questions crack the hush like a dropped coin on church stone. The baker's boy stammers, sweats lifts his palms as if they might hold off the tide of anger building behind those hungry ribs. A soft curse at your elbow draws your eye. An old man with a basket of nothing shakes his head, muttering about his grandson's empty belly. He tells you, without asking, if you care of 3 bad harvests in his lifetime. The last one, he says, drove men to scrape bark from trees, to boil leather into soup. No records speak kindly of those winters. London remembers them only in the hush of parents who tell hungry children to chew slowly, pretend they're full. A cart rattles down the far end of the lane, a pair of parish men perched atop sacks bound tight in tarpaulin. The torchlight catches the crowd's faces, hope flickers, then falters as the men shout orders to clear the way. Grain for the guilds, they say. Not for the queue, not for you. The boy at the front tries to hush the fresh shouts, but the hush breaks into snarls and fists pounding the cold bakery door. Your breath clouds the air. You taste the fear that churns beneath this riot's thin skin. One spark, a stone, a shove, a careless word, and this line becomes a mob. And mobs eat first with fists, later with mouths. Some scholars say Tudor bread riots rose not from rebellion, but desperation, a last bluff against starvation's patient squeeze. You slip back before fists fly. Hunger's a quicker thief than any pickpocket, and tonight you'd rather keep your ribs unbroken. At a corner, you pass another line. This one hushed, clutching smaller baskets for scraps, cheaper grains, even lumps of old bran to stretch what little they have. Here a child cries as his mother hushes him with an empty promise of stew tomorrow. You wonder if she believes herself. You run your thumb over the stale heel in your pocket. Enough for now. But what of tomorrow, and the next day, and the one after? The city's bellies are never full for long. A rumor will feed the crowd's rage longer than the bread feeds their bones. Some say smugglers slip through the gates each dawn, with grain bound for the countryside, richer villages, better kitchens than yours will ever know. Beyond the lane, you catch sight of a parish guard watching from the shadows. He leans on a polearm, eyes flicking from the restless line to the locked storehouse doors. He knows, as you do, that hunger is London's fiercest law. The only mercy here is how quickly a riot burns out until the next cart rumbles through the next rumor blooms. You tuck your collar higher, stepping into the darkness away from the clamor. The city hums behind you, a chorus of empty stomachs singing for scraps that may never come. You grip the crust in your pocket as if it were gold, because tonight it is. You slip out of Baker's Row as the murmurs swell into shouts behind you, voices cracking the quiet that's never quite safe in London's hungry dark. Your feet carry you away from the smell of sourdough and anger toward the outskirts where the city's cobblestones fray into wagon ruts, and the air tastes less of smoke and more of damp hedgerows. It's here, at the ragged edge of Tudor London, that thoughts of escape bloom like weeds in frost. A narrow gate waits at the far end of the lane, half a door really creaking on one iron hinge, watched by a man who wears his boredom like armor. The toll-keeper's coat is patched, but his eyes are bright as a fox sniffing a chicken coop. He knows who's supposed to pass through these gates at night and who's not. A coin here might buy silence, or might buy a shout to the nearest watch patrol who drag you back inside the city's choking walls before you could slip your boots over the threshold. Some say the countryside is worse cold, wild full of bandits, and forest laws written by lords who never dirtied a boot on these muddy lanes. Others claim freedom waits just past the last row of cottages, an open sky, a field too, till a chance to breathe air that hasn't soured in a tavern's throat. Historians disagree on how many poor souls fled the city, hoping for a scrap of land, only to trade London's filth for a master's whip in some far-off sheep pasture. You duck behind a barrel near the toll-keeper's post, fingers brushing the small purse you've managed not to lose to pickpockets and petty bribes. Enough for a loaf or two. Maybe enough for a nod and a look the other way, if you time it right. Beside you, two shapes slip from the shadows, a man with a limp and a girl who can't be more than 12, her hair shorn rough to her shoulders. They don't look at you. They look at the gate, the toll-keeper, the black line of trees just visible beyond the wall. The man clutches her wrist tight, whispering fast. You catch the edge of it, a promise of an uncle's farm, honest work, no more dockside filth to scrub from her fingernails. She nods, but her eyes stay pinned to the gate like it might swing shut forever if she blinks. A cart rattles up a pair of barrels, lashed to its bed, a driver hunched low under a moth-eaten hat. He tosses the toll-keeper a copper without stopping the mule's lazy plod. The gate swings wide enough to let them pass. You watch the man and girl slip into the shadow of the cart, matching its slow roll, until they vanish beyond the wall. The toll-keeper pretends not to see. His pocket jingles as he scratches his nose. Your own chance comes next. You step from behind the barrel shoulders, squared, as if you belong here, just another tradesman, bound for an early errand beyond the city's reek. The toll-keeper eyes you, weighing the risk against your coin. A grin twitches under his rough beard when you drop your last farthing into his palm. He lifts the latch with a lazy shrug. Mind the road, he mutters. Foresters won't care where you're from if they catch you cutting where you shouldn't. You nod, though you're not planning to fell a tree tonight. You slip through the gate before his mood sours boots, sinking into mud so thick it tries to eat your soul's whole. Behind you, the city's glow flickers low, the hush of distant bells muffled by damp fields and hedgerows that lean in like eavesdroppers. A hedgehog rustles through dry leaves as you follow a wagon track that winds between scrubby bushes and gnarled oaks. The air here smells sharp, wet earth, moss, the faint breath of a far-off sheepfold. For a moment, it feels cleaner, softer. But the countryside has its own teeth. Bandits nestle in these hedges, waiting for fools too hungry or desperate to pay tolls on safe roads. Some stories claim whole families vanished under the trees, never found, never spoken of again, except in tavern mutterings and parish fears. You step careful. Your ears catch every broken twig, every owl's low question from a branch overhead. Somewhere out here, free men scratch at dirt with bare hands and call it liberty. Somewhere, runaways stand on stolen land, hoping the sheriff's riders never come. Some records say they built secret villages tucked into deep woods. Others claim they simply traded one master's cruelty for the forest's indifference. You pause when the lane dips into a hollow where the fog hangs low and cold. You wonder what you've truly escaped smoke and stalks. Yes, but for what? A field. A rope if you're caught. Or maybe, just maybe, a patch of dawn light no city wall can cage. Behind you, London sighs into the dark, unmoved by one more ghost slipping through its cracked old gate. You stand at the edge of the hollow, breath ghosting in the damp night air, heart drumming a question older than these muddy ruts. Would you really make it back? Back to London's tangled lanes, its crooked chimneys, coughing out gossip, and smoke back to the docks and taverns and rope beds strung like tired prayers across attic beams. Or maybe the better question is, should you behind you, the old city squats on the banks of the Thames, a creature so used to swallowing the poor that it barely notices who slips out its side gates. Ahead, the track runs thin into hedgerows and black trees. Some say the road ends in freedom. More likely it ends in another man's fields, another man's rules, another back stooped over frozen earth, for wages half as thin as city gruel. You drift forward under the skeletal arms of an ancient oak, its branches scratching at the starless sky. Somewhere out there, hidden in the hedges, bandits wrap themselves in cloaks, just as threadbare as yours. Some prey on fat merchants bound for country manners. But the truth is, lean wanderers like you bleed easier and shout softer when the knives come out. Parish scrolls note bodies found in ditches by shepherds, pockets turned inside out, no name, no kin to claim them, but the crows. You follow the wagon ruts deeper into the hush boots, squelching through mud that clings to your soles like the city's old whispers. Here even the wind feels like an echo of all you left behind. Dock hands slinging crates, bakers selling stale loaves, watchmen half drunk under flickering lanterns ready to turn a blind eye for a copper. You see them in your mind's eye, busy spinning the city's great wheel without you. A fox crosses your path, brush-tail flicking eyes bright in the dark. He pauses, watches you, like he knows you're no more king of these lanes than he is. Then he slips into the underbrush, the hush swallowing him whole. You envy him, no master, no stocks, no sumptuary laws, pinning silk and velvet out of reach. Just sharp teeth and sharper wits to keep him warm through winter. Up ahead, the hedgerow breaks open into a clearing where the track forks. One branch dips toward a tangle of thatch roofs, some peasant's cottage, or an alehouse promising warmth if you've coin enough to pay, and courage enough to trust strangers under a low beam and a smoky fire. The other path winds deeper into woods, older than any bailiff's ledger, darker than any debtor's cell. Some say the lost slip through those trees and come out the other side wearing new names, or none at all. You drop to a knee, fingers brushing the cold earth. A bent sprig of rosemary pushes up through frost-kissed dirt, a hint of someone's garden, once tended now wild. You pluck a leaf, rub it between your thumb and palm. The scent drifts up sharp and clean. You remember the sachet at your neck, bought to keep the plague away. Did it work? Or did you simply outrun the city's filth by sheer chance? Some scholars argue the odds were always against you. One slip of the tongue, one bad turn with the plague, one careless joke near a church spy. Yet here you are, boots damp, but throat clear, your head still resting on your own shoulders instead of the block. So maybe you're luckier than London meant you to be. A crow calls from a branch overhead, sharp mocking, but oddly familiar. You smile despite the chill. Perhaps it's true, what old dockhands say. London never forgets who tries to leave. Even if you vanish into the hedgerow, the city keeps your ghost tucked under its cobblestones, one more secret, under centuries of dirt and spilled ale. You stand shouldering your pack, what's left of your bread crust, a few coins rattling soft in your pocket, the memory of streets that could have killed you 100 ways but didn't. Behind you, dawn teases the edge of the trees with a ghost-light glow. Ahead lies an open road or a snare waiting in the frost. Either way, you step forward. In the end, the question hangs, like your breath in the morning cold. Did you make it back? Or did you trade one trap for another, one master, for the wild teeth of a world that won't know your name when you're gone? Maybe London's stones remember. Maybe the river still whispers about the one who slipped through the fog, half ghost, half grin pockets, lighter than promises, yet somehow still breathing. You pass through that hush and find yourself somewhere older still, where footsteps echo on flagstones, and warmth is a thing earned one ember at a time. The road behind becomes rumor. The hearth ahead flickers into view. You stand in the half-dark of a sprawling stone scullery, low beams brushing your cap. The hearth here is nothing like the grand fireplace upstairs, where your mistress might warm her silk-slippered feet. This one is black and hungry, demanding more wood than your arms can carry in one trip. You feed it anyway, one splintered branch at a time, nursing sparks until they roar. Each crackle reminds you that warmth upstairs costs sweat downstairs. Behind you, the floor is slick from yesterday's spills. A girl no older than 13 kneels sleeves, pushed back, scrubbing away the sticky ghosts of gravy and dropped stew. You nod at her, and she nods back, a small pact of morning silence. If the master rises early and catches soot on his slippers, the blame finds your shoulders before the ash can settle. A single window leaks dawn into the room, like a secret too bright to hold. You glance at the door that leads up to the great hall, still closed, still heavy. Behind it sleep the people you'll never be. Their dreams drift on tapestries and feather bolsters, while you watch coals settle into their glow. This kitchen hums with more than clattering pots. It's a hive of small rumors, exchanged between slaps of dough and clanks of iron pans. Some say the steward drinks too much of the master's ale, that the butler's wife once flirted with the stable boy. Others speak of the lady's jewelry box, how a missing brooch returned itself just as quietly as it vanished. You keep your head, low ears, half open. Words are worth more than silver. Hear loose tongues, buy favors, or at least a kind word when you spill milk on the hearthstone. You know each corner by heart, where the rats slip in to snatch crumbs, where yesterday's stale crusts hide under the chopping table tomorrow's stolen breakfast, if you're quick and no one sees. Your palms are raw, from the last scolding knuckles still pink where hot water blistered them. But the fire's alive now, licking the soot off old iron. Small victories count when your world begins before sunrise? Outside, the cocks crow as if the day were their gift to give. Inside, the mistress's bell hasn't rung yet a mercy. You mop a puddle of last night's wine from a crack in the flagstones. Every stain is a memory of a feast you never tasted. Some scholars still puzzle over why the Tudor nobility trusted so many secrets to those who swept their floors. Perhaps it was arrogance or the quiet truth that even the lowest servant's eyes never sleep. Your breath fogs the cold glass as you pause by the window. Beyond it, the garden waits under a veil of frost. Soon enough, you'll fetch herbs, carry buckets from the well, and haul logs from the coppice. For now, though, the embers glow, the scrub brush rasps and gossip blooms like steam from a boiling pot. And as the manor wakes above you, your day is already half spent. The dawn belongs to the ones history barely writes down, the ones whose stories rustle like straw under the Lord's feet. You wouldn't think a single bucket of water could weigh down a life, but your spine knows better. Outside the scullery door, the first breath of morning stings your cheeks. The path to the well is still damp with last night's mist, and the manor's timber bones creak behind you as if whispering that someone's watching. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. You don't look back. You're already late. One hand grips a wooden pail that leaks near the rim. The other drags a bundle of twigs and branches, some stolen from the Lord's orchard at the far edge of the grounds. They call it pilfering. You call it staying warm enough to keep your fingers from cracking. The rules are clearer than the sunrise. Don't get caught. Don't drop a single log, and don't leave footprints that tell tales when the head groundskeeper makes his rounds. The well stands just beyond the herb garden, a circle of stone half swallowed by overgrown mint and wormwood. You lower the bucket rope, rasping against the frost-rimmed pulley. When it hits the water, the splash is louder than your breath. You haul it up shoulders, straining knees braced against the cold flagstones. Some days, the rope snaps the bucket tips, and you start again. Some days, your fingers slip on the wet hemp, and you spend the rest of the morning with bloodied palms. Scholars still debate how much back-breaking labor shaped the Tudor poor compared to their city cousins. Records are patchy, but your muscles write a truth clearer than any ledger. Everything weighs more in the morning wood-water worry. You trudge back to the kitchen door, dripping on the flagstones. The wood bundle shifts on your shoulder, pressing splinters into your neck. A passing stable boy eyes your load, smirks, and flicks horse dung from his boot with a stick. You want to ask him for help, one arm around the logs, one on the bucket, but you know better. Help means favors owed, gossip, shared secrets traded. Better to bend your back and keep your silence. Inside the hearth eats your branches greedily. The fire that warms the master's slippers burns bright on stolen twigs. You tip the bucket into a row of iron kettles, washing, stewing, scrubbing. There's never enough. By midday, you'll be back at the well and back again before dusk. The floors never stop needing water. The mistress's linen never stops needing suds. At the far end of the kitchen, the same young girl from before rubs her wrists and mutters about soap stinging her cracked skin. You catch her eye for a heartbeat, a small nod that says, "I know." It's not much, but kindness below stairs is measured in looks, not words. They say some noble households had indoor pipes, clever lead contraptions that carried water from rooftop cisterns. But not here. Here every drop rides your shoulders in a wobbly bucket that leaks just enough to soak your skirts. Chill your knees, stain the floor. You'll scrub again tomorrow. A rat scurries by the hearth, pausing to sniff a crust that fell from the breadboard. You nudge it away with your boot, careful not to squash it. Rats are trouble, but so are the masters if they find footprints in flour or droppings near the storeroom. A quiet rat is better than a scandal. The kettle starts to steam. You watch the wisps curl toward the rafters. Maybe if you stand still long enough, you'll drift up, with them float past the oak beams, past the mistress's velvet bed, out into the orchard where the stolen branches once grew. But stillness is dangerous. Stillness says you're idle, and idle hands find trouble. So you lift the bucket again. You drag the mop across the stones where your drips turn dust to mud. And you wonder in a whisper you'll never speak aloud how many spines bent like yours in centuries past, how many still bend now. Outside, the well waits, the branches wait, the bucket waits, and you shoulder the weight because no one else will. There's a shine that clings to silver, like a secret tarnish creeps in where no one looks, waiting for careless hands and sleepy minds. You stand in the narrow pantry, now a dim corridor, lined with shelves that smell of damp wood and stale bread crusts. The silver lives here, stacked in neat rows behind locked doors you never hold the keys for. Platters, spoons, ladles big enough to see your half-starved reflection in each piece, a tiny sun that must glow spotless by supper, or you'll find your wages docked and your pride scraped raw. You lift the first tray from the shelf, its cold edge biting your palm. Beside you, a boy barely 12 polishes candlesticks, the tin of paste blackening his fingers. He hums under his breath, a tune his mother taught him before she sold him to the manor for 2 pennies and a promise of warm porridge. Some days, you envy that hum. Some days, you wish you'd never hear it again. A soft cloth, a dab of vinegar, a circle rubbed again and again until your wrist aches. In the hush of the pantry, every scrape and breath is a confession. Last winter, they say the steward caught a scullery maid pocketing a silver spoon. They say she vanished down the back lane with only her slippers and the stolen shine hidden in her apron hem. Some scholars argue whether thefts like these were common or just whispered to keep servants obedient. Records blur, but stories sharpen in the telling. You lean closer to your reflection in a serving tray warped, but there you are, a face smudged with soot, hair pinned back, 2 tight eyes that flick to the door at every footstep. There's no privacy in a pantry. Secrets stick here like dust behind the shelves. A clatter startles you. 2 spoons slip from the boy's hands and ring out like a summons. You hush him with a look, but the sound is already racing up the stairs. If the mistress hears, she'll glide down in her heavy skirts, sniff the air for lies, and weigh the boy's future in the curl of her lip. You've seen her do worse for less. Once a single tarnished goblet meant 3 weeks without pay for the whole kitchen. You bend to pick up the spoons, your fingers brushing his. His eyes dart to the closed door. You both breathe again when no shadow appears under the crack. Back to work, rub polish, rub again. You think of the silver laid out upstairs for banquets you'll never taste. Goblets brim with spiced wine you pour, but never sip. Platters stacked with goose mutton sweetmeats that brush your nose but never pass your lips. You hold the feast in your hands and live off crusts dropped by mistake. They say a servant's pride lives in the shine of the master's wealth. It's a lie you swallow with the soap you scrub from your cuffs when you're done. Pride lives in the hush of a job well hidden, no spots, no fingerprints, no cause for shouting. You pause to flex your wrist, listening for footsteps above. The house is stirring now. Boards creak, a distant bell rings for bread and tea. You work faster, the tray gleaming in your reflection, a small moon you catch before it wanes. At the far end of the pantry, a tiny door leads to the wine cellar. Cold air slips through its cracks, carrying a whiff of old cork and spilled secrets. You've never been allowed down there alone, too tempting, they say. A sip of sherry here, a drop of brandy there. Too easy for a girl with cracked hands and an empty stomach. Too easy to blame when something goes missing. So you stay by the silver. You polish the spoons until your knuckles ache and your mind drifts far beyond the pantry walls to fields you've never seen, markets you'll never walk, stories you'll never star in. Here, your story is this: keep the silver bright, keep your head down, and hope your name never echoes in the mistress's voice. When the tray glows so clear, you almost see tomorrow in it. You set it back in its velvet cradle. One down. 20 more to go before the sun creeps too high, and someone notices you standing still. Outside this dim room, the house wakes hungry for polished gossip and the hush of secrets that shine just bright enough to blind you. A dropped dish is louder than thunder in a Tudor manner, especially when it crashes through the hush before breakfast. You stand stiff-backed near the kitchen threshold, watching as a new maid, face flushed and eyes wide, kneels among broken shards of a porcelain bowl that probably cost more than she'll ever see in a year's wages. Above her, the mistress hovers like a storm in velvet. Her voice is soft in that terrible way, a simmering whisper that promises rage will come later when it can bite without witnesses. For now, her gloved hand hovers near the broken pieces as if they might stain her silk cuffs. You stand very still, broom in hand, heart drumming under your apron. One mistake, that's all it takes to wake the mistress's temper. A stew, too cold a candle snuffed too soon, a silver spoon laid an inch off center. Her anger is a skill sharpened over years of rank and rules. The stories say she once threw a platter at the steward's head for serving wine she thought stale. Some scholars argue whether the wine was truly sour or the steward simply fell out of favor that week. The truth lives in bruises that never make it to the record books. You remember your first scolding, the words carved into your spine sharper than any switch. The way you learned to move silent as a shadow, to hold your breath when the mistress swept by perfume curling around her like poison roses. The older maids took you aside that night by the hearth over the crackle of logs and hidden tears. They gave you the only advice that matters here: never look her in the eye. When she's angry, never speak unless spoken to. And if you must cry, do it behind the larder door, where the onions can take the blame. The new girl hasn't learned this yet. Her hands tremble as she gathers the shards into her apron. One cuts her palm, a thin red line that will sting under lye and scalding water later. She bites her lip eyes, darting to the mistress's frown. You catch her gaze for a moment, offer a small nod, silent words that say, "Keep your head down. Survive this." Behind you, the kitchen hums with forced quiet. Pots clink softer, feet shuffle slower. Everyone knows anger is contagious here. If the mistress can't find fault in the girl, she'll find it in your undone laces, your uneven fire, your forgotten bucket by the hearth. A dog snores under the table, oblivious to the tension. You envy him no scoldings, for him just scraps from the master's hand and a warm patch by the fire. Some days you wish you could trade places, let your spine curl on straw, instead of bowing under invisible weights. The girl finishes sweeping. She stands curtsies too low and stammers an apology that floats like stale air between them. The mistress says nothing. She only turns skirts, sweeping the broken dust, and leaves a silence thicker than the crack she's carved into the morning. When she's gone, the kitchen exhales all at once. A footstep here, a spoon dropped gently there. The older maids gather the new girl by the water. Beryl washed the cut with brine and muttered blessings. One of them, a woman with a back bent from years of kneeling on cold floors, whispers a story about the mistress's own youth. How she was once a girl, too, standing in some other lady's shadow, trembling over a spilled cup. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's just a scrap of comfort, passed around, like stale bread, when the stew runs thin. You lean your broom against the wall and kneel to wipe the last pale dust from the flagstones. One stain gone, 1,000 more waiting. The day creeps on heavy, with the hush of footsteps, careful not to wake the mistress's temper again. As you rise, your knees pop like old wood. The new girl watches you, eyes still wide, learning without words how survival works here. You give her a half smile that says, "It's only your first lesson. There are so many more." Above, footsteps creak on the floorboards, soft shoes, sharper heels. The household stirs, while below stairs you practice your silence, your nods, your small, careful rebellions, tucked into apron pockets no one dares turn out. Somewhere in the pantry, silver waits to be polished again. Somewhere in the hall, a whisper starts its crawl from one mouth to another, carrying tales that could save you or ruin you by dusk. And in the kitchen, you stand still for just a breath, broom in hand, waiting for the next crack to appear in the porcelain calm. Walls have ears, they say, yet in a Tudor manner it's the servants who lend them. You stand by a corridor's bend, a tray balanced on your hip, listening through a crack where the great oak door sits ever so slightly ajar. Beyond it, two voices murmur over parchment and wine, low enough to carry only bits and pieces. Names, debts, promises, stitched with threats soft as silk. You know better than to lean in too close. You know better, but you do it anyway. Because in this house, knowledge is currency you can't afford to lose. A single overheard word can buy you mercy, a lighter chore, a crust of bread, when the mistress's scowl might say no. So you listen. So does everyone else. Beside you, a boy too young to shave, but old enough to lie about it, shifts his feet. He's polishing the hallway's brass candlesticks, but you both know that's an excuse. His ear is pressed to the grain of the wood. If caught, he'll swear he was checking for drafts, nodding solemnly as if drafts were his life's calling. You almost smile. Inside the room, the master's voice rises sharp, then smooth as warmed butter. He's bragging about a shipment of wine, a cousin's disgrace, a new law that might ruin a neighbor. None of it yours to repeat, except that you will quietly, when the right ears lean your way. Historians still argue whether Tudor servants truly shaped their masters' fates with secrets traded behind heavy doors. Some say the gossip was all smoke nonsense whispered to feel important. Others claim those scraps of knowledge fed revolts, shaped betrayals, turned fortunes on their heads. The truth lives in these corridors, in the hush between footsteps, in the flicker of a glance exchanged across a dim hallway. You shift your tray to the other hip. A silver goblet clinks against the pewter plate. If it spills, you'll have to explain why you lingered here so long. You glance at the boy. He flicks his rag against the candlestick lips, twitching toward a grin. The two of you are conspirators in a war of silence. Down the hall, The steward appears, shoes polished to a squeak, eyes sharp enough to cut cloth. He pauses, sniffs the air for mischief. You lower your gaze. The boy drops to his knees, scrubbing an invisible mark on the baseboard. The steward frowns, turns, vanishes through a side door. Breath returns like a forgotten gift. Later in the servants' quarters behind the kitchen, you'll trade what you heard for something you need: a warm seat by the fire, maybe, or a slice of yesterday's pie hidden under a napkin. Gossip here is a barter system sharper than any blade. Speak too much, and you'll be branded a sneak. Speak too little, and you starve. You learn to measure each word like sugar, scarce precious, dangerous in the wrong mouth. A rat scurries past your footnose, twitching near the hem of your apron. It pauses, listens, scuttles on. Even vermin carry tails, some say. If you believed half the stories, the mice in the pantry have seen more scandal than the steward's ledger ever will. You step back from the door just as it swings wider. The master's laughter spills out warm and false as cheap wine. You bow your head low, a shadow in plain sight. He doesn't see you, not really. Servants are furniture, useful, silent part of the house's bones. Yet you hold more truths in your apron folds than he'll ever guess. In the corner of the hallway, the boy mouths something. Later. You nod. Later, you'll lean by the kitchen hearth, share the half-heard names, the debts, the secret about the cousin's disgrace. In exchange, you'll learn where the kitchen maid hid her secret stash of apples, how the stable boy slipped a horseshoe out for a passing peddler. Knowledge moves like oil through the gears of this grand creaking house. It greases, palms, softens tempers, buys small mercies when the mistress's scowl turns deadly. You adjust your tray step back into the shadows, ears still open for the next careless word. In this house, silence is armor. But a whisper, well, that's the blade you keep tucked behind your tongue. A crumb can feel like a feast when your belly's been empty since dawn. You're back in the kitchen now, bent low by the pantry shelves, where the air is cooler shadows, thick as butter, and secrets hide between sacks of flour and barley. Your fingers brush against the rough wood, hunting for what's left from last night's meal. A crust of bread, a sliver of cheese hardened at the edges, any scrap that might fill the echo under your ribs. You've done this before. So has everyone below stairs. It's the unwritten rule that hunger loosens. Honesty turns a loyal servant into a quiet thief just for a bite that won't be missed. Above you, the manor groans with gentle music. Chamber doors, open feet, pat across carpets. The mistress's voice drifts through the floorboards like perfume gone stale. But down here, your breath is a hush. One cough might summon the cook's broad back and sharper tongue. You find it a heel of rye bread, half hidden behind the sack of oats. You pinch it between thumb and forefinger like a jewel. For a moment, the stolen bite is yours alone, a soft rebellion against empty bowls and promises of second helpings that never come. They say the penalty for stealing food could be harsh dockings, dismissals, even the stocks, if the master chose to make an example. Some scholars remain divided about how often such punishments were enforced. Records tell you one thing. The soft truth told in whispers says another: everybody stole. The difference was who got away with it. You sink back on your heels, chewing slow. The bread tastes of dust and salt and something sweeter defiance. Across the kitchen, an older maid catches your eye. She says nothing, just turns her back to stir the pot hanging over the hearth. Her silence is a blessing, a pact sealed by hunger. Your tongue finds the edge of a cracked tooth souvenir of last winter's accident with the stew ladle when a scrap of bone slipped through and chipped it. There's no money for a doctor, no time to complain. You chew on the other side, careful not to wince. A cat whines between your ankles, tail flicking. You drop the smallest crumb to the floor and watch it vanish under her quick paw. Even the animals steal here, mice with their sly forays into grain sacks, dogs with their hopeful eyes under trestle tables, cats slipping scraps into hidden corners. You envy their freedom. No one summons a cat to the mistress's chambers at midnight, or beats a dog for dropping a tray. Footsteps heavy, this time boots meant to remind you that the steward roams these halls like a shadow. You stand quick, wipe the crumbs from your lips, and press your palms to your apron, as if you've always been here, just rearranging shelves, just doing your duty. The boots pass, pause, then move on. The older maid hums to herself, never turning around. Her ladle taps the side of the pot, a code only you can read. All clear. Just this once. At the back door, the scullery boy slips in with a grin too wide for his skinny face. He tugs something from his pocket, a handful of cold goose fat scraped from yesterday's roasting pan. He offers it like a bribe, and you take a swipe with your finger, smear it on a scrap of bread that's not really yours. The fat coats your tongue slick and heavy and rich enough to make your throat tighten with a strange mix of guilt and relief. You nod to him, a silent thanks. He'll want something in return, maybe a piece of gossip you overheard, maybe a lie told on his behalf when the cook asks where the last scrap of dripping went. So be it. Down here trades keep you fed as much as crumbs do. They say a good servant never steals. But the walls whisper otherwise. They hold the memory of stolen pies slipped under skirts, pilfered apples tucked into sleeves, a wedge of cheese passed hand to hand behind the larder door. Small crimes for small mercies. You tuck the last bit of crust into your pocket, just in case tomorrow's morning comes, before the kitchen fire's warm. Hunger never sleeps, and neither does the quiet rebellion that feeds you when nobody else will. When the sun sinks behind the manor's crooked chimneys, the real darkness doesn't come from the night, it comes from the waiting. You stand by the hallway window, now a stub of a candle in your hand, its flame flickering like your resolve. Your master's out carousing in town, some say, or slipping coins into the palm of a merchant with debts to hide. It doesn't matter where he is. What matters is that you'll be here when he returns ready, with a taper to light his path up the grand staircase, to see his boots, muddied or polished, to keep your eyes lowered, as he stumbles in half-drunk and smelling of ale that costs more than you'll earn this winter. They call it candle duty, a simple phrase for hours spent guarding shadows that creep up walls like gossip. You and two others stand watch tonight. The boy with the watery eyes who nods off on his feet. The girl who hums under her breath to keep herself awake. The hush between you is filled only by the candle's hiss and the occasional pop from the hearth in the servants' room down the hall. Some nights are quiet. Some nights you wait until the wax puddles at your knuckles and the master never comes home at all. Other nights he storms in with rage, sloshing in his cup kicks over a stool, shouts for brandy you can't pour fast enough. You never know which night it will be. That's the trick of serving. Your spine must be stiff enough to stand soft enough to bend. Historians still debate how much a servant's life was shaped by these midnight vigils. Some say candle duty was a small price for room and board. Others argue it was one more thread in the tapestry that bound men and women to households that owned them without chains. Your candle drips wax onto your wrist. You shift it, watching the flame gutter in the draft. Outside the courtyard is a patch of silver frost under the moon. A stable boy passes by, leading a horse too tired to whinny. He doesn't look up. Everyone down here knows the value of lowered eyes. You catch your reflection in the window, just a ghost with a flame for a heart. The manor behind you creaks and settles stones, sighing with age. Somewhere above, the mistress's dog scratches at a chamber door. Somewhere below, rats chew through the grain sacks, claiming their share of what the household hoards. The girl beside you nods off chin, bobbing to her chest. You nudge her awake with your elbow. Her eyes blink open wide and round as the candle flame you both guard like a secret. She mouths a thank you and rubs sleep from her face. If she's caught dozing, the steward's switch might find her shoulders before dawn. You think of the bed, waiting for you, a pile of straw, if you're lucky, a hallway bench if you're not. No feather bolster, no canopy draped with velvet. Just a corner where you tuck your limbs small enough to fit the space your betters forget exists. A distant door creaks open. Boots clack against the flagstones. You straighten candle high. The master appears, coat slung over one shoulder, hat, askew mouth, slurred with words that make no sense to anyone sober. He sees you only as far as the flame you hold. He doesn't see the stiffness in your wrist, the sleep you pushed aside to wait for him. You bow your head as he passes, letting the warm drip of wax bead on your thumb. He brushes by, mutters something about tomorrow's hunt, about wine for breakfast. Then he's gone up the stairs, trailing his troubles like mud on your clean floor. You stand alone now, the stub of candle sputtering toward nothing. The other two drift off, one to the scullery corner, the other to the hallway's end, where a blanket and a promise of sleep wait. You stay a moment longer, watching the last flicker die. The house is never fully dark. There's always another light to keep another step, to listen for another shadow that needs watching until the dawn returns to swallow secrets you hold in the hollow of your chest. They call it courtship, but below stairs, it's more like borrowed warmth than romance. Stolen kisses behind linen sheets, quick touches when the mistress isn't counting heads. You stand in the dim laundry room now, the air thick with steam and the scent of soap laced with secrets. Wet linens hang overhead like ghostly sails. Beneath them, a pair of young hands brush together at the washtub. She laughs too loud. He hushes her with a glance toward the door, where the cook's voice hums in the hallway beyond. You pretend not to see your eyes fixed on the copper pot you're scrubbing to a shine that will never last. Love is a fragile luxury here. One wrong whisper, and a girl finds herself packed off to her uncle's farm, or worse, her belly swelling with proof of nights spent too close to the wrong corner of the pantry. Some scholars insist that servants' dalliances were overlooked, so long as they didn't breed scandal. But the truth slides between floorboards, hidden by the same hands that smooth blankets on the master's bed. You remember your first brush with it, barely 16, pressed against the cold wall behind the stables, a stable boy's breath tangling with yours in the hush before dawn. His promises tasted of stolen cider, and dreams too big for your apron pockets. By winter, he was gone, signed on with a merchant ship, or so they said. You still wonder if he stands on some deck remembering your name, or if you were just a line in a song he sings to no one. Near the window, the young couple leans close. Their elbows touch. Her giggle snags on the dripping linen like a moth caught in a curtain. You clear your throat and drop a heavy bucket by the washboard. The clatter is a warning and a kindness, an extra heartbeat for them to step apart before a sharper pair of eyes peers in. Evenings in the laundry room breed more than folded sheets. They breed plans, whispers of cottages rented on the edge of town, dreams of taverns run by two hearts tired of bowing to silk-clad tempers. But dreams cost coin, and coin is scarce below stairs. So most settle for quick embraces, secrets passed in the hush of soapy water, and a promise to meet behind the drying lines when the house sleeps. A rat rustles in a corner, nosing a dropped crust. You flick it away with your foot. Rats and lovers, they both find their way back if you're not careful. Someone once told you of a girl who carried on with the steward's nephew. For a season, she wore ribbons under her cap gifts. He slipped her behind the storeroom door. Then came the bump under her apron, the hurried whispers, the quiet morning when her bed was found empty. Some say she fled to the coast. Others say she never made it past the orchard wall. Stories below stairs have short memories and long shadows. The wash-water clouds with soap and secrets. You dunk a linen sheet under scrub at a stain shaped like a spilled stew that ruined the mistress's supper last night. Your knuckles ache raw from lye and cold rinses. You wonder just for a breath what it would feel like to slip behind these hanging sheets, find arms waiting to pull you close without fear of a door swinging wide. The boy brushes past you on his way out, his grin a flicker in the steam. The girl lingers a moment longer, fingers tracing the edge of a drying rack as if it might promise more than splinters. She catches your eye, half embarrassed, half daring you to say a word. You don't. Below stairs, the unspoken is safer than truth. Outside, the bells chime the hour late enough that the mistress will soon summon warm water for her bath, or a clean shift laid across her bed. You wring the linen water pooling around your boots, your reflection fractured in the puddle. Love here is hidden in these puddles, folded into sheets, tucked behind cupboard doors, where only the moonlight finds it. You drain the tub, haul the bucket to the next task, and tell yourself you're too old for stolen kisses, but not too old to guard their secrets like your own. There's a hush in the nursery that doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the child at the breast of a woman who isn't his mother, to the soft suckle and the quiet sigh when tiny hands curl into borrowed skin. You stand by the door, eyes lowered as the wet nurse shifts the baby on her arm, her own gown loose at the shoulder, her eyes fixed on a window that doesn't show her anything worth seeing. They say it's a kindness for a noble mother to hire a wet nurse nourishment for the child freedom, for the lady to return to dances and gossip and silken gowns that won't fit over swollen breasts. But for the nurse, it's something else entirely. You know her name, Agnes. She was a farmer's wife before her husband's cough took him under the frost. When the mistress offered coin for milk, she said yes. What other answer could there be, with her own mouth to feed and no man left to plow the field? The baby is pink and soft, his size like a kitten's mule. You watch as his eyes drift closed, belly full of warmth, drawn from someone else's body. It should be a tender scene, a mother and child. But the mother sits behind a desk in the next room, quill scratching out orders for new draperies. A breeze sneaks through the nursery's cracked window, brushing your cheek. You wonder if Agnes feels it, or if her world is narrowed down to this one small head pressed to her breast. Some scholars write that wet nurses were cherished by noble families trusted with secrets of the cradle. Others say they were disposable, dismissed the moment their milk dried up, their own children, lost to hunger, because another mouth always came first. Agnes hums under her breath, a tune that sounds older than the stone walls. Her fingers tap a slow rhythm against the child's back, 1, 2, 3. She'll do this for months, maybe a year, if the mistress is pleased. Then she'll be paid, thanks sent off with coins clinking in her apron pocket. Maybe enough to buy seed for a plot of land. Maybe enough to find her own child wherever she left him, swaddled in rags, with an old aunt who curses every cry that interrupts her sleep. You've seen her once in the scullery, stripping onions with hands still cracked from winter's cold. She laughed when the cook asked her why she didn't bring her own babe here to suckle him side by side. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Everyone knows a lady's child drinks first. You shift your weight from foot to foot, careful not to creak the floorboards. The baby burps softly, milk dribbling down his chin. Agnes wipes it away with the corner of her sleeve. Her eyes flick to yours, brown tired. But there's something there that doesn't belong to the mistress. Pride, maybe, or defiance, or just a memory of the boy she left behind. The cradle creaks as she lays him down, careful not to wake him. He stirs anyway, mouth-searching fists clenching around empty air. Agnes pats his belly, hums the tune again, low secret carrying words only she remembers. You catch a snatch of it. Hush thee, a lullaby for another child sung to one who will never know the voice was borrowed. Somewhere beyond the door, the mistress's laughter bubbles up bright cold as glass. She calls for sweetmeats, for wine, for her hair to be brushed and braided for the evening's supper. The baby sighs, settling back into sleep that will claim him until the next hunger wakes him, crying for milk that costs another mother her own child's warmth. You step back, careful not to catch the latch. Agnes doesn't look up this time. She's busy tracing a fingertip along the baby's cheek, as if memorizing softness she can't afford to love too much. When she stands, her back straightens her shawl, pulled tight to hide what's left of the life she gives away. You slip from the nursery, your breath tight in your throat. The hallway swallows you back into its hush, but somewhere behind that door, borrowed warmth fades too soon, and two mothers dream of children they can't hold at the same time. No one boasts about cleaning the privies, yet someone must crouch by the stink and scrub away what noble stomachs leave behind. Tonight, that someone is you. You stand, with your back bent, under a low timber beam, a bucket of lye in one hand, a rag in the other. The air here is sharp, thick with the sour tang of old waste and cold, damp stone. One wrong step, and your foot's in yesterday's secrets, splashed where the chamber pots overflowed, because the mistress's youngest couldn't be bothered to call for you before the candles guttered out. The Tudor privy is no grand chamber, just a seat of rough wood, perched above a pit, sometimes lined with brick, sometimes not. Rats rustle in the straw you've packed around the edges to stop the worst of the draft. They watch you with tiny black eyes, unbothered by your curses muttered under your breath. They say the lowest servant always ends up here. Not because they did anything wrong, simply because someone must. And if you're here, your family might be fed one more winter. Your brother might have shoes without holes. Your sister might keep her place in the laundry room instead of finding herself here beside you, her knuckles raw and nose full of this sour hush. You drop to your knees, brush scraping the wood smooth again. Some claim the Tudors sprinkled herbs, lavender, rosemary around these corners to mask the smell. You find no lavender here tonight, only the bitter bite of lye that eats your skin as surely as hunger eats your belly. Scholars disagree about how bad the privies really were. Some say they were surprisingly sophisticated for their age. But no record mentions the cold that crawls up your skirts when you kneel too long, or the itch that settles in your throat from breathing this stench hour after hour. Your mind drifts as you work always, somewhere else, anywhere but here. You remember the cook's story about the footman who snuck the mistress's mint pot to scatter in the privy when she complained about the smell drifting up to her bedchamber. He was caught, of course. No one asked how her silk pillow stayed so sweet while your knees sank into filth. A soft sound breaks the steady drip of your rag footsteps, light but hurried. A maid appears in the doorway, apron clutched in her fist. She doesn't look at you at first, just stares at the wall above your head. Then she mutters about the mistress's dog sick again, needing fresh straw in its corner by the fire. You nod more to show you're still here than because you care about the hound who eats better than you ever will. She hesitates, eyes darting to your bucket. You read the truth in her fidget. She's run short of soap, come to beg a dip from your stash of lye to scrub the kitchen table before supper. You nudge the bucket toward her with your knee. No words needed. She'll pay you back with news of who's been let go, who might vanish by morning light. A trade, same as any scrub for gossip, stink for survival. She vanishes as quick as she came, leaving you with your brush and the soft drip of winter rain leaking through the privy's cracked roof. You glance up at the beams, counting the drips as they splash your wrist. 3, 6, 9. Your back screams when you stand, pressing a hand to your spine like it might crack in two. There's no glory in this corner, no warmth waiting when you're done. Just the comfort of knowing tomorrow the mistress's hem won't trail through filth. The master won't wrinkle his nose and shout for the steward. If they notice nothing, you've done your job. If they see a stain, you're blamed twice over once for the mess. Once for daring to remind them where the mess comes from. You wring the rag, dry toss it in the bucket, and duck through the low door back into the hallway. The air there feels clean, almost sweet, though you know it's only your nose tricking you after too long in the pit. There are better chores waiting somewhere upstairs, somewhere warmer. But the privy always calls you back, same as the rats in the rain. And tomorrow you'll come brush in hand, scraping away what polite company pretends never exists. If walls could speak, they'd whisper that sleep comes slow for those who serve. You stand now at the far end of a drafty corridor, blanket clutched tight around your shoulders, straw rustling under your boots. There's no chamber waiting for you, no soft feather mattress under embroidered canopy, no heavy curtains to shut out the night's chill. Instead, your bed is a corner of the hallway floor, the spot nearest the master's chamber, so you'll hear him when he wakes dry-mouthed and shouting for ale, or when the mistress calls for a warming pan to chase away the cold from her silk sheets. Some nights, you try to count the knots in the wooden planks above you, 1, 2, 20, but sleep breaks apart every time the floor creaks under someone's step. A candle gutters on a small stool by your head, its flame just bright enough to carve shadows out of the beams overhead. You tuck your knees up, press your face into the crook of your elbow, breathing in the smell of your own wool and the faint greasy tang of tallow smoke. Beside you, the scullery girl curls like a cat on her own patch of straw, a thin shawl, her only barrier against the night's bite. She mutters now and then half dreams of burnt bread and stew pots that never empty. Once she woke gasping from a nightmare about the mistress's voice, sharp as a thrown plate. You held your breath until she fell quiet again. Some comfort is too costly to give in the dark. Some scholars argue that servants chose these hallway beds to be close to the household's heart, ready to leap up at a knock-a-spill, a sudden whim. But you know better. It's not choice. It's the only bed left, once the master's dog is curled on the hearth rug, and the spare pallet in the scullery is claimed by someone older, meaner, or simply quicker than you. A floorboard pops near the stairwell. You freeze eyes flicking toward the master's door. Nothing. Just the bones of the house settling into sleep that will never reach you. Some nights, you catch snatches of laughter drifting down from the upper rooms, guests lingering too long over wine, a noble cousin stumbling back to his borrowed bed with a giggle that sours when he kicks off his shoes. Their dreams come easy, wrapped in fur blankets and heavy drapes that shut out the world you carry on your back. You press a palm to the floor, rough cold, a splinter waiting for careless skin. There are worse places to lay your head, the garden shed, when the mistress banished you for spilling gravy, the root cellar, when the steward locked the pantry door to count silver spoons. So you settle your cheek against your own wrist and pretend the straw is softer than it is. Somewhere near your feet, a mouse scurries, bold as any lord under moonlight. It pauses near your discarded shoe nose, twitching at crumbs you didn't know you dropped. You watch it work, tiny claws scraping whiskers trembling. The scullery girl stirs but doesn't wake. You envy her for that. If you sleep too deep, you risk the summons a sharp rap of knuckles on oak that drags you half awake to stoke a fire, fetch a drink mop a stain. No one will thank you for scrubbing. Best to hover here, balanced on the cliff edge between dream and duty. They say Tudor servants rose before the sun and fell into bed long after the embers died. What they don't write down is this: how you measure rest in stolen minutes. How you learn to doze, with one ear pressed to the corridor, heart beating in time, with every creak and sigh of a house that never truly sleeps. You roll to your other side, careful not to wake the girl. The candle flickers low wax, dripping onto the makeshift stool where you set your folded apron for a pillow. You close your eyes. Try to drift, but behind your lids, the manor stays awake. Footsteps whispers a door that might swing wide any moment to remind you this straw isn't really yours at all. Still, you nestle deeper, breath warming the wool at your mouth. For now, this patch of hallway is yours alone. A borrowed bed in a house that forgets your name the moment it calls for your hands. There's a rustle at the back door tonight, a whisper of cold air, and something more dangerous than frost. You slip from your corner, near the hearth, ears pricked for footsteps that don't belong to the mistress or her heavy-footed steward. Outside the kitchen door, a man waits, a peddler, wrapped in a patched cloak hat pulled low over eyes that flick from window to window. He's not meant to be here, not at this hour. But then neither are you pressing your palm to the latch, like you're about to steal more than a breath of midnight air. You open the door just wide enough to slip through. The peddler lifts a basket from under his cloak. Candles, stubs half burnt and snuffed out at last night's feast. You know whose hands gave them up, yours, the scullery boys, the older maids, too proud to beg, but not too proud to barter. He tips the basket, shows you other treasures, bits of stale pie, a crust of cheese scraped clean of mold, a twist of cloth hiding a heel of sugared bread. All from the master's table, none of it missed by those who feasted. You glance over your shoulder, listening for the dog that sleeps by the hearth, for the squeak of the steward's shoe on the pantry tiles. Nothing but the hush of winter's breath and your own heart knocking on your ribs. The peddler's breath clouds the air between you sharp with cider and the promise of coin. Small coins, copper bits that vanish as fast as they change hands. Still a penny in your apron means soap, a comb, a pair of wool socks, come winter's deepest bite. You nod once slow. He knows what that means. Tomorrow, maybe you'll slip him a leftover apple, a stub of tallow from the mistress's candle. Nothing so large, it gets noticed. Nothing so small, it's worthless. A trade quiet as footprints on frost. Some scholars write that servants were honest to a fault, loyal to masters who fed and clothed them. But you know better. Loyalty here is a door you crack open when no one's watching. A bite for a penny for a word for a favor that might save you when the steward's temper turns sharp. You take the coins he offers, hidden in the fold of your sleeve. He turns back toward the shadows, boots crunching over gravel, slick with the evening's freeze. He'll vanish down the lane before dawn, his basket lighter, your pockets heavier by a whisper. Inside, the hearth flickers low. You slip the coins under a loose stone near the scullery drain, safe from the rats, safer still from the mistress's sharp eyes. She'd say it's theft. You'd say it's survival. Same difference in a house where your name is worth less than the cost of a candle stub. A soft creak behind you, just the cat stretching from its nap by the warm ashes. You scratch its ear, feel the purr rumble under your palm. Even the cat understands the trade warmth for scraps for a mouse kept from the flour sack. Everyone earns their keep. Above the manor sleeps deep. The master's dreams lurch from wine to coins to the next hunt he'll brag about at supper. Below, you dream smaller of a new apron, maybe a sweet roll tucked under your blanket when the frost comes hunting your bones. The peddler's basket will be back tomorrow, or the day after, same lane, same hush behind the orchard wall. You'll stand there again, apron pockets heavy with secrets. Maybe you'll risk more, half a wedge of cheese, a sliver of ham, too tough for the mistress's plate, but worth its weight in copper when hunger pinches a neighbor's belly. No one writes this into the history books. No paintings of candle stubs sold in moonlight. No ballads about the hush-hush barter that keeps feet warm and stomachs lined. But here, below stairs, this is the trade that matters most. A secret economy spun from drips and scraps, folded into pockets before dawn. You ease the door closed behind you, careful not to rattle the latch. The hearth waits a soft glow in a house that takes more than it gives. You bend to stir the coals, tuck the secret of your coins deeper than the embers. Tomorrow, the master will pass you by without a glance. But tonight, you know your own worth measured not in wages, but in the warmth of a deal struck behind a half-open door. Sometimes, it isn't what you say that ruins you, but what someone else swears you said. You stand by the stairwell tonight, broom in hand, as the steward's voice cuts through the hush like a blade drawn slow across silk. In the corridor beyond, a maid stands, frozen her apron, twisted in her hands, eyes fixed on the floor. She's young, too young, to know how sharp words can be when they're flung like stones by a mouth that never paid for them. The steward leans in, close one finger, wagging near her cheek. He calls her careless, a gossip, a troublemaker. He says she's spoken secrets that belong locked behind oak doors and silver keys. You know she didn't. You were there when the words were whispered, if they were whispered at all. A careless nod, a half-heard confession in the warmth by the hearth, then twisted into a tale worth repeating by someone eager to climb a step higher while she falls two below. You sweep slow eyes on the dust your broom gathers. The hush around you holds its breath. The other servants hover at doorways, heads half turned, ears pricked. Everyone knows this could be them next time. One rumor, one wrong look, one small truth, traded for favor, and the hallways shift to swallow your name whole. Some historians puzzle over whether Tudor households truly ran on rumors like this one slip of the tongue, meaning ruined dismissal, a new face scrubbing floors before the echo of your footfalls has faded. The ledgers say, wages owed, tasks done. The walls remember stories different altogether. The steward's voice drops now, quieter, meaner. He promises her no more bed near the hearth, no warm bread at dawn. Out. Gone by morning light. A scandal avoided when there was never a scandal to begin with. You watch her nod, chin trembling, apron twisting tighter. She knows to beg won't help. She knows her words mean nothing weighed against the steward's nod and the mistress's cold stare. You shift your broom, catching her eye for a heartbeat. It's all you can give, a flicker that says, I saw you. I know. Not enough to save her, but enough to remind her she's not entirely erased yet. She turns away her shoes, whispering over stone as she slips down the corridor. Maybe she'll vanish through the servant's door tonight. Maybe she'll sleep one more night in the straw corner before she's gone for good. Where does a girl like that go? Back to a father's farm? To a cousin's kitchen? In a town where her name isn't yet tarnished on someone else's tongue? Or maybe she'll end up scrubbing someone else's hearth in another manner, her head bent lower, her mouth locked tighter. The broom flicks dust into your pan, tiny specks of old straw ashes from the hearth crumbs from bread you never tasted. Each speck a piece of someone's mistake, someone's rumor, someone's truth, twisted just so. When the steward turns his eyes, snag on you. He says nothing, just sniffs, lifts his chin, strides off in search of fresh trouble. He leaves you in the hush that follows broomsteady in your hand. Nearby, the older maid you share your straw with shuffles closer. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't have to. Her whisper slides from the side of her mouth like steam from a kettle. Keep your head down. Keep your mouth shut. You nod, pressing your broom back to the stones, sweeping the last of the girl's name into your dustpan with the crumbs and the cold. Somewhere above, the mistress's laughter rings out bright, brittle, safe behind walls that rumors can't stain. But here below stairs, you weigh every word like gold. A sentence traded can buy you mercy or misery. You carry the dustpan to the bin by the back door, empty it slow. Watch the bits scatter in the frost-tinged night. Small pieces of a life brushed away before dawn can fix them in place. Tomorrow, another face will crouch by the hearth where she sat. Another hand will scrub where she once whispered secrets she never meant to tell. The house forgets quick. Only you remember. Your broom taps the stones as you head back inside, the hush folding over you like a warning. Say nothing. Hear everything. Trust no one who promises your name is safe in their mouth. Sometimes, the only way out is through the door. No one watches. You stand by it now. Oak swollen with damp hinges, stiff with rust, your palm pressed flat to feel if the night beyond is colder than the stone under your feet. They say the best servants vanish quiet as breath. No slammed doors, no farewell, tears no bundle left behind for someone to find at dawn. Just a gap in the straw by the hearth, a bowl left cold, a name that slips from gossip faster than it arrived. Tonight the wind worries the thatch above your head. You can feel it in your bones as you shift your weight from foot to foot, listening for any sign the steward's soft shoes might appear around the corner. He counts the bodies in the morning, not at midnight, and by the time he notices, the lane will have swallowed you whole. The girl beside you trembles, skirts hitched to keep the hem from dragging in the mud. She's barefoot shoes tucked into her apron, tied by the laces so they don't flap and betray her. You asked no questions when she whispered, "I'm leaving." You just nodded because sometimes leaving is the bravest lie a servant tells herself. Some scholars wonder how many truly fled. Did they find kinder roofs, warmer hearths, softer hands waiting at the edge of the next town? Or did they vanish under hedgerows, sleep in churchyards, trade one master's temper for another's whip records, say discharged without cause? The truth rustles in hedges and drifts down alleys where cold cobbles greet worn boots. She squeezes your fingers, once quick, urgent. You remember how she laughed last harvest, hiding a stolen apple under your blanket. How she stood watch while you slipped a crust from the pantry. Small crimes that bound you like twine. Now, you're cutting the knot loose, handing her to the darkness, and hoping it's kinder than the walls that held her tongue still. You unlatch the door, slow, every hinge groaning like a rumor that wants to wake the whole manor. She slips through sideways, a ghost, with skirts pressed tight to her thighs, hair pinned under a borrowed cap. Her breath fogs in the lantern light that spills through the crack. For one heartbeat, you see her smile, sharp, hopeful, half ready to break. Then the wind catches her, and she's gone, boots in hand, footsteps lost on the frozen path that winds past the orchard wall beyond the kitchen gardens, past the place where the master's hounds won't scent her trail by morning. You close the door soft, pressing the latch into place with your thumb so it doesn't rattle. Behind you, the scullery flickers with candlelight shadows of the others still half asleep on their straw beds. One stirs, blinks at you, but asks nothing. That's the rule. If you help someone vanish, you bury the story with them. Back at your patch of floor, you curl your knees to your chest. The blanket's thin, but better than the wind. You tell yourself she'll find a cottage, maybe work in a tavern where no one cares about her name or what rumor sent her stumbling into the night. Maybe she'll find a warm bed that isn't paid for with stolen sleep and bent spines. Maybe. Historians argue about the freedom servants clung to when they slipped away under moonlight. Was it freedom, or just another kind of bondage traded for the hope of softer chains? You think about it as the embers settle in the hearth, your eyes half shut the hush, broken only by a rat scuttling through the cold ashes. You wonder if tomorrow, when the mistress asks where she's gone, you'll shrug and say, "I don't know." It won't be a lie. The night keeps its own secrets, and so do you. The wind rattles the door once more, but you don't flinch. In this house, a door half open is sometimes mercy, sometimes escape, sometimes a promise. You pray you'll never need to make for yourself. You tug the blanket up to your chin, feel straw, prickle your ankles, and let sleep come. Slow, half dream, half dread, one eye always on the door that creaks softer when freedom calls. At the end of all the hush and hard hours, there's only the hearth embers dwindling to gray ghosts of their former crackle. You stand before it now, broom in one hand, an old rag draped over your wrist. The manor above you sleeps velvet drapes, drawn tight secrets, tucked into feather beds where no ash dares cling. You though your work isn't done until the fire sighs its last breath. The grand fireplace in the main hall is a giant's mouth, wide enough for a child to stand inside. Tonight, it gapes at you with the half-life of coals that fed warmth to nobles who'll never know the taste of soot clinging to your skin. You crouch down, brush the last charred splinters into a pile. Each stroke of the broom is slow, careful. You know the cost of sparks left unwatched, one stray ember, and by dawn, the manor's timbers could roar with flames that swallow every silk cushion, every polished goblet you scrubbed your knuckles raw for. Some say it happened once. A servant girl turned her back too soon, and the fire leapt for her apron like a hungry dog. The records list her name as negligent. The rest of her story blew away with the ash. Your shoulders ache from the day's stoop buckets, hauled secrets, carried gossip swept under rushes that hide more than spilled wine. You rake the coals forward, watch the last flicker gutter and glow. It's an old ritual, older than the stones under your knees. Last to rise, last to rest. A mouse darts across the hearthstone nose, twitching at a crust you pushed aside hours ago. You flick it away with the brush's bristles, careful not to strike too hard. Let the creature live. It knows these walls better than any lord ever will. Above you, the great hall whispers in its sleep. Banners hang limp shadows, drape the carved beams where your breath curls in the hush. You think of all who sat here tonight, boots kicked near the fire you fed hands, warmed by your labor. Now their laughter drifts down, as faint dreams you have no claim to. Some scholars write that hearths were the heart of the Tudor household symbols of life of family gathered close. But for you, the hearth is duty. Ash under nails, splinters in your palms, a sore back that knows the chill when the flames die down. You toss the last handful of cinders into a copper pail, listen to them hiss like secrets meeting cold iron. You wipe your nose on your sleeve, smear a line of soot you'll scrub away tomorrow, if tomorrow lets you wake before the mistress's bell. Behind you, the scullery boy snores under a bench. His feet stick out from under a frayed blanket heels, bruised from chasing scraps to sell the peddler behind the orchard wall. You wonder if he dreams of silver spoons, or just of bread that doesn't taste of someone else's crumbs. You stand, brush bristles trailing ash across your toes. The hearth is empty now, save for the faint glow you dare not trust. You place the iron guard before it, like a gate that says, enough. Tomorrow, you'll feed it fresh twigs, stolen from the orchard's edge, fingers numb, knees wet with dew. You'll coax it back to life as if it never died, the same way you coax your own hope awake when dawn breaks through the cracks in the servant's door. Somewhere beyond the shuttered windows, a cock crows, too early throat raw, with the promise of another day like this one. You sweep the last dust into your pail, trace your finger over the hearthstone, warm beneath the grime. This is your legacy, embers swept quiet so others sleep warm. You step back, one hand on your hip, the other brushing hair from your eyes. Tomorrow, they'll marvel at the warmth, never guessing whose hands cradled the coals until they whispered their last. You bend low, softly on the faint glow. Watch it wink out like the final secret you tuck under your tongue. No thanks, no song, just the hush of a hearth that forgets you as quick as it forgets the flames. Now the embers are gone, the hearth swept clean, and the grand manor above your head settles into its final hush. You lie there on that patch of straw near the door. You never really call your own, listening to the sigh of old beams and the soft scurry of mice behind the walls, tiny companions in this endless game of waking before dawn and sleeping just after the last flame dies. Your breath slows. The night folds itself around you like a thin blanket that can't quite chase the cold from your bones, but reminds you it's there all the same proof. You're still here, still breathing in the quiet gaps history forgets to write down. Beyond the heavy door, the orchard waits under moonlight branches, bare, but brimming with secrets you once stole for kindling. Somewhere a dog barks a note of life that flickers and fades into the hush. If you close your eyes, you can almost believe you're free wandering cobbled lanes barefoot away from cold kitchens and watchful stewards, and the hush of whispered threats that keep your back bent and your mouth closed. Sleep drifts closer now, tugging at your thoughts like a gentle hand that means you no harm. You let it lead you down old corridors where no bell rings your name, no mistress scolds your trembling fingers, no rumors snap your spine in two, just shadows soft as velvet candle stubs guttering out, without need for tending a hush so deep it holds you safe until dawn. And if you wake before the sun, well, perhaps tonight's story will linger in the ashes, a warm ghost, to remind you that even the lowest whisper can matter, that a single stolen crust can taste like freedom, and that the quiet ones who sweep the embers aside leave traces no ledger ever truly erases. So rest now, little keeper of secrets. May the hush cradle you, the hearth guard you, and the gossip fade with the flicker of your dreams.